Tuesday, July 9, 2020. Call to order, Madam Clerk.
Good morning. We've been having electronic participation meetings for a few months now, so I'm going to provide a shortened review of the protocols for electronic participation in this regular Regional Council meeting. This meeting is being streamed live, both audio and video, from the Region of Peel website. We are conducting this meeting using WebEx. For an optimum WebEx experience, we ask you to please take the necessary measures to avoid feedback, interference, and confusion with members speaking over one another. The recommended WebEx meeting display view is active speaker and thumbnail video view, so that you will have a full view of the presentation slides and other meeting materials. During staff presentations, the slides will be visible on your screens. If you are having difficulty viewing the slides, they were all provided to you in the revised agenda that was distributed on Tuesday. If you are experiencing a poor Wi-Fi connection, please disable your video. If you drop off the meeting, please rejoin, and if you have difficulties, please contact your local IT department first for assistance, following the same process as you do for local council meetings. As required, your local IT department will reach out to regional IT staff for further assistance. If you wish to speak, please click on the round participant icon at the bottom of your screen to enable your participant list. To indicate your request to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon located to the right of your name in the participant list. Your hand icon will turn blue when engaged. Members who connect to the meeting via the dial-in option can send an email to council@peelregion.ca and you will be added to the speakers list. When called upon, please unmute your microphone and proceed. When you have concluded your comment or question, please mute your microphone and lower your hand by pressing the then blue button to the right of your name in the participant list. Voting will be conducted verbally. For procedural votes that do not require a recorded vote, I will call for any objections. If you have an objection, please unmute your microphone and indicate your name and objection. If no objections are stated, the motion will be deemed to be adopted. For recorded votes, I will call upon each member in alphabetical order based on last name. Once called upon, please unmute your microphone and indicate your yes or no vote. I will confirm the vote for each member. If you do not respond when called upon to vote, I will call your name a second time. If you do not respond to the second call, you will be recorded as abstaining from the vote, and your vote will count in the negative as a nay vote. If you are leaving the meeting, please send an email to council@peelregion.ca to indicate that you are leaving the meeting. If you have left the meeting for any votes thereafter, you will be marked absent. We do have a delegation on the agenda this morning. For delegates, when you are called upon, please unmute your microphone and begin your deputation. At the end of your presentation, please mute your microphone. If there are questions from councillors, they will be directed through the chair. Please unmute your microphone to answer any question that the chair directs to you, and mute your microphone when you have completed your answer. If the meeting should move into closed session, those members who are participating remotely must ensure that no other person is in the location from which you are taking part in the meeting, or make appropriate arrangements so that any other persons cannot see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place. If this is not possible, the member must withdraw from the meeting until it has moved back into public session. Prior to moving into a closed session, members shall declare that they adhere to the confidentiality standards as outlined in the Regional Council Code of Conduct. If you have questions as we proceed through the meeting, please send them to council@peelregion.ca together with a request to speak. We shall now commence the meeting with roll call. Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Brown, thank you. Councillor Carlson?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie? Mayor Crombie did indicate that she may be late. Councillor Demurla?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Downey?
Present.
Thank you. Counselor Fonseca?
Yes, here.
Thank you. Counselor Fortini?
Yes, good morning. I'm here.
Thank you. Counselor Groves?
Present.
Thank you. Counselor Innes?
Present.
Thank you. Counselor Kovac?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Mahoney? Counselor Mahoney?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I'm having some.
That's okay. Thank you. Counselor McFadden?
Good morning, everyone. I'm here.
Thank you. Counselor Medeiros?
Here.
Thank you. Counselor Paleshi?
Morning, President.
Thank you. Counselor Parrish?
Is getting a test done this morning, so she will be quite late.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Raz?
Present.
Thank you. Counselor Sato?
Here.
Thank you. Counselor Santos?
Good morning.
Morning, thank you. Counselor Sinclair?
Present.
Thank you. Counselor Starr?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson?
Present.
Thank you. Counselor Vicente?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you all. That concludes the roll call, which brings me to our Indigenous land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and which the region of Peel operates is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Now, I also have a bittersweet item I want to deal with now at the beginning of the meeting as well, because today marks the retirement of Ava McIntyre, our Deputy Clerk and Legislative Services Manager. It's my pleasure to acknowledge Ava McIntyre, who is listening today, and in fact, I just had a brief chat with her a moment ago, from her office here at 10 Peel to her last meeting of Regional Council in her role as the Deputy Clerk and Manager of Legislative Services. After almost 23 years with the region of Peel, Ava has decided to retire to spend more time with her husband, James, who many of you will also remember as the region's former Director of Purchasing. Ava has been a constant, steady presence throughout her tenure at the region, first as a legislative coordinator in the clerk's office, then taking on the role of Deputy Clerk and Manager in 2003. As manager, Ava has led her team through approximately 346 regional council meetings, budget and special meetings, countless committee meetings, and has helped plan and execute 7 inaugurals. Ava has also served as acting regional clerk for several periods throughout her career. Ava played a huge role in the transformation of these chambers from orange-colored chair and carpets, wood-covered walls, and dome ceiling to the modern technology-equipped council from where our meetings are now conducted. She championed the change to paperless agendas and worked with various stakeholders to implement the electronic agenda management system that is in use today. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the impact Ava has had on staff, and not just those whom she leads. Ava's laughter is a familiar sound here at headquarters. Over the years, she has been a mentor to those wishing to further their careers, both here at the region and through her work with the Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario. I have seen Ava's interaction with her staff and my council colleagues and have no doubt that her impact will be lasting and her support dearly missed. Ava, on behalf of Regional Council, both past and present, I thank you for your service to the region of Peel and wish you many, many, many happy years in your retirement. The only other thought that I would leave to you as I read this, there were 3 words missing from it that I would insert immediately: dignity, poise, and grace. Because Ava's served us with dignity, poise, and grace. And what a testament to her. The last words she shared with me just a moment ago as I was congratulating her and saying, what a great time with your husband. Go out and enjoy it. You've deserved it. Better things ahead. Her first thought was, and as much as I'd like to do that, I'm going to miss the staff and the people that I worked with, and she shed a tear thinking about the colleagues that she leaves behind. No surprise. So we're losing a good one. Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to reach out to Ava as well, say thank you for, she started when I started, and I got to tell you, she's been very supportive and a great partner to the town of Caledon as well. But Ava, enjoy your retirement. You've been a class act all the way, and Mr. Chair, I can't think of better words than what you just summed up.
Thank you very much. Well said. Okay, that brings us to declarations of conflict of interest. Hearing none. Approval of the minutes, the June 25th, 2020 council meeting. That the minutes be approved as moved by Councillor Fonseca and seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That carries. Approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, do I have some additions? I will read them accordingly. As moved by Councillor Starr and seconded by Councillor Innes, that the agenda for the July 9, 2020 Regional Council meeting include a delegation from Allison Canning, Executive Director, Let's Get Together, regarding a technology collection drive to be dealt with under delegations item 7.2. And further, that the agenda for the July 29, 2020 Regional Council meeting include a motion from regarding financial assistance for municipalities to be dealt with under COVID-19 related matters, item 8.5. And further, that the agenda for the July 9, 2020 Regional Council meeting include a communication from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act 2020 to be dealt with under COVID-19 related communication items, item 9.5. And further, that the agenda for the July 2020 Regional Council meeting be approved as amendment. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, that is carried. Now we turn to the consent agenda. Following our presentations, I go to items under 9, communications, asking for items to be held on consent. Item 9.1.
Mr. Chairman, it's Mayor Crombie. Just want to let you know I'm here now.
Wonderful. Welcome, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, we're just on to consent items. The first one I enunciated was 9.1 to be going forward on consent. 9.2 on consent. 9.3.
Hold, please, Councillor Santos.
9.3 to be held. Thank you. 9.4 on consent. 9.5 on consent. Then we have several staff presentations. We go on to communications on items under planning. 12.1 on consent. Items related to enterprise programs and services. 13.1. 13.2. 13.3. 13.4.
Hold, please, Councillor Santos.
13.4 to be held. 13.5. 13.6. 13.7.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I
Yes.
think Councillor Parrish would like to hold 13.6.
13.6 to be held.
Yeah, that maybe we can deal with it when she gets here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Items related to, 13.7 was on consent then. 13.6 to be held. Items 15 related to public works. Item 15.1 will be dealt with
Hold.
our, and to be, and
Sorry,
also,
I'll hold.
sorry, Mr. Chair.
yes? Council-
I think 13.7 and 13.6 are kind of the same thing, so can we hold both?
Both to be held
I'm
then to
not
be
sure
clear.
exactly which one she wishes to
Okay,
speak to,
so
so
we
as
will-
chair of the committee, I think.
We will hold both for now, 13.6, 13.7.
Thank you.
With regards to 15.1, Mayor Thompson, you've asked that it be held, and I know we're dealing with it under 7.1 with the deputation as well, so that'll be held and dealt with at that time. 15.2 on consent. Communication 16.1. Items related to human services, 19.1, also related to 8.2, I might add. 19.2 on consent. 19.3 on consent. Then we have a couple of notices of motion, 22.1 and 22.2. I have bylaws. I do want to deal with the in-camera, just so we can let staff know if they'll be needed or not, and then get back to work. Under the in-camera items, 24.1, proposed property acquisition.
Hold it.
To be held, 24.1. 24.2, in-camera on consent. 24.3 is now on the public agenda. 24.4. On consent, 24.5 has been withdrawn, and 24.6. And that is,
You better hold,
yeah, and
you
that's
better hold
related.
that as well.
Yeah, that's a related item to the ones that we've held before, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So now I need a motion, Madam Clerk, with regards to the consent agenda.
That the matters outlined by Chair Unica be approved under the consent agenda. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demerla.
I just wanted to clarify, the motions have been held, right? I couldn't tell whether.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Yes.
Councillor Demerla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah.
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes.
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney.
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden.
Yes, I'm in favor.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi.
In favor?
Councillor Paleshi in favor. Councillor Parrish is absent. Councillor Raz.
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sado.
Yes.
Councillor Sado in favor. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair.
In favor?
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
In favor.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
Favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Carries. Thank you.
Very good. That gets us on to delegations. First item 7.1, Samra Adkar, Director, Electricity Networks and Indigenous Policy Branch, Ministry of Energy, Northern Development Mines, and Ahmed Maria, Director, Transmission Planning Independent Electricity System Operator, providing an overview of the Northwest Greater Toronto Area Transmission Corridor Identification Study and updates on progress to date, also related to item 15.1. And the deputants have asked, and it's a rather important file, if they may take more than the 5 minutes, and I think that's appropriate under the circumstances. So with that, Samir, welcome, and you're up.
Thank you, Chair Unica, and thank you for inviting us to speak today. You can go to the next slide, please. Our presentation today will provide an update on electricity planning in the Peel region, give an update on the status of the Northwest GTA Transmission Corridor Study, and also outline our next steps. The presentation also has some additional background material on the regional electricity system planning process for reference. At this point, I'd like to hand it to my colleague from the ISO, Ahmed Maria, to cover the next 2 slides about electricity needs in the Peel region.
Thank you, Samir. Can we move to the next slide? So my name is Ahmed Maria. I'm the Director of Transmission Planning at the Independent Electricity System Operator. For those of you who may not know, the ISO, among other things, is responsible for planning the electricity system in the province. This is a system that essentially supplies power to the local distribution companies like Electra and to the major industrial customers. We work with these local distribution companies. We work with transmission companies like Hydro One. We work with municipalities, regions to forecast the demand for electricity in the province. We then assess the capability of the system to supply that demand, and then we develop our plans accordingly. Back in 2016, we developed a plan for the Peel and Halton region, where we identified the need for some system reinforcements in the near term and in the long term. We also identified some need for new infrastructure in the near term and the long term. Today, we're working on the next cycle of electricity planning for the Peel and Halton region, and that study is expected to be concluded in 2021. So far, up to this point, we've been seeing needs that are very similar to what we saw in 2016. One of those needs is driven by growth in northern Brampton and in Caledon. This growth is happening away from major electricity infrastructure, which is why we're working with the Ministry of Energy and Northern Development and Mines to reserve some land along MTO's GTA West Highway for electricity infrastructure. This is actually best seen on slide 4, the next slide. So in this slide, this is a slide of a map of the GTA, and it shows where all the major transmission lines are located. So the brown lines are the transmission lines, and you can see that there are transmission lines from Burlington to Vaughan along Highway 407. There are transmission lines along Highway 403 through Mississauga, transmission lines along the QEW, and there are radial transmission lines going from south to north, supplying Brampton. The growth that we're seeing in northern Brampton and Caledon, as you can see from this map, is away from all of this major electricity infrastructure. So this is why we want to set aside some land for electricity infrastructure to supply this growth. So there's 2 points I want to make on this. The first point is that this idea of locating transmission lines close to or adjacent to highways is not new. It's good land use planning practice, and you can see that in the GTA it's been done with all the major highways. The other point I would like to make is at this time we are only proposing to set aside land for a transmission line. We're not proposing to build anything on this land at this time. The need for, and the reason we're doing this is because we're anticipating that we'll need to build transmission in this area to supply future load growth. And so this is the reason why we're doing it. The study that we're doing right now for Peel and Halton that will be completed by 2021 will give us a good idea of when we will actually need to build transmission lines and electricity infrastructure on this land that we're setting aside. So I think at this point, it's a good time to turn it back to Samir, where he can talk a bit about the study that we're doing to identify what land we want to set aside for future electricity infrastructure.
Thank you, Ahmed. Next slide, please. The rest of the presentation deals with the transmission corridor study itself. Our ministry and the ISO initiated this study in June 2019 to identify a corridor for a future transmission line. The final outcome of the study, which would come after the Ministry of Transportation confirms the route for the GTA West transportation corridor, will be land preserved for a transmission line and protected from other development, and it would be adjacent to the GTA West highway corridor. In the future, when the need for a transmission line becomes more clear with a well-defined scope, a transmitter would still need to obtain all necessary approvals and justify the need for the line before actually building a transmission line. And that includes meeting all the environmental assessment requirements and getting a construction approval from the Ontario Energy Board. Next slide, please. There are several guiding principles that we are using and will need to balance against each other to identify and continue to narrow down the corridor study area. Firstly, co-location with linear infrastructure, as Ahmed mentioned, and this is namely MTO's GTA West transportation corridor. Secondly, cost effectiveness. For example, leaving transmission line options open that are lower cost. For example, crossing highways or other developed areas has a higher cost. Next, minimizing potential environmental impacts, including to natural heritage sites, etc. Also, minimizing impacts on built-up areas, and this includes existing and planned developments and areas such as airports, for example. And lastly, providing flexibility to be able to consider different transmission options in the future. For example, being able to accommodate different tower designs of different heights or width or underground lines. Next slide, please. There are several benefits of identifying a potential corridor early. One, ensuring that communities have the electricity infrastructure they need to support their growth. Also minimizing impacts to the environment. Without an identified corridor, when the transmission line is actually needed, the only remaining routes could be through environmentally sensitive areas, for example. Also preserving economically viable routes, for example, the cost to underground electricity transmission infrastructure through built-up areas is significantly more expensive, and those costs would typically be borne by the local residents on their electricity bills. Also, just providing certainty to municipalities, as well as landowners and developers on where the transmission line will be as you plan for growth. Next slide, please. In the next couple of slides, I'll be describing the study area. After these slides, I'll have some slides of maps that will make these descriptions easier to understand. The transmission corridor study follows provincial policy that supports co-location of linear infrastructure. Decisions regarding the transmission corridor study will follow decisions from the MTO's GTA West Transportation Corridor EA study. The transmission study started in June 2019, and the study area was largely identical to MTO's study area at the time. And at the time, this was called the 2015 Focused Analysis Area, or FAA. The key difference was that the transmission study added some land south of the 407-401 interchange to be able to connect the future transmission line into the existing grid. Next slide, please. In September 2019, the MTO introduced a study area that had been narrowed from the 2015 corridor, which had a width that ranged from about anywhere from 1.5 to 4 kilometers roughly, to a narrowed corridor, which it stands today, with a width that is generally about 900 meters, but gets wider in certain areas such as interchanges or river crossings. Later that same month, our transmission study area followed the MTO study area with a couple of key differences listed here. One, retaining areas needed to connect to the existing transmission grid, and also eliminating certain areas from our study that are only applicable to the MTO transportation study. The next two slides have maps that will better show our study area compared to the MTO study area. Next slide, please. The dotted line is our current corridor study area. The shaded gray for reference was MTO's 2015 FAA. The lightning bolts, it's a little bit hard to see in this map, but the lightning bolts represent future connection points to the electricity grid. Next slide, please. Again here, the dotted line is our current transmission corridor study area. The dark solid gray line is MTO's 2019 FAA. Along most of the corridor, you can see they actually overlap exactly, and they're largely identical. The key differences I'll just explain right now. If you go to the bottom left of the corridor, near the 401-407 exchange, you'll notice the transmission study area is expanded past the MTO study area. And again, this is in order to connect to the transmission grid in the future. There are also several spots as you move along the corridor to the east, near the 410, Highway 50 on the south side of the corridor, and at the very east end of the corridor, where you can see our transmission study area does not include parts of the MTO study area. One last point of difference, near Highway 50 at the north part of the corridor, you can see, well, it's hard to see, but there is a small lightning bolt symbol, and there's a very small area where the transmission study area is expanded further north than the MTO study area. Next slide, please. We recently sought feedback on the study area through the environmental registry, as well as discussions with Peel and other regions like Halton and York. One of the things that we heard back, not only from Peel, but also from Halton, was about the study area near the 401-407 interchange. And again, if you remember, this is the area where we've expanded past MTO study area in order to connect to the grid in the future. So we understand that certain areas, such as the 9th Line lands, Meadowville Business Center, Corporate Park, area near the Lisgar GO station, are very important for municipalities for development. Based on that feedback, we're proposing further reducing our study area from what was shown on the previous slide in order to minimize some of the impacts on these planned developments. Our study team will continue to coordinate, especially with the city of Mississauga in this area on the affected Ninth Line lands as the study progresses. It's good to note that we also met separately with representation from the Brampton Flying Club earlier this year, along with Caledon regional councillors, and heard the importance of the airport to the region and the challenges a future transmission line could cause. So we're very sensitive to the needs of that area. Our study team has been working with the Brampton Flying Club to understand the very complex technical requirements around siting transmission near an airport. Our aim is to identify enough land to preserve a reasonable range of transmission options, for example, different tower heights, undergrounding the line, in order to mitigate any potential impacts to the airport. Again, I'll point out that many of these issues will need to be addressed by a future transmission proponent during detailed project development and detailed design, which is much further down the road. Next slide, please. So next steps is our last slide. Right now, we're continuing to review comments received and on our narrowed study area, and continue to engage stakeholders and municipalities and regional authorities. Our study is reliant on decisions made by the MTO. For example, if MTO makes changes to their 2019 FAA based on consultation feedback, we'll have to react and may have to make corresponding changes to our study area in the following weeks or so. Right now, the MTO has indicated they plan to confirm their 2019 FAA this summer, and that could also mean introducing some changes at that time. Our study area would be confirmed shortly after. And at this stage, again, this summer, it's important to remember that many of the particular decisions about a transmission line will not come until much later. Our focus now is on preserving as little land as possible that's in addition to MTO's corridor area, while still preserving flexibility to minimize cost and environmental impact with a transmission line in the future, and keeping the flexibility to deal with areas like those in proximity to the Brampton-Caledon Airport. Thank you, and that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, and I have a list of speakers: Sinclair, Thompson, Paleshi, Downey, Sato. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, I have some questions and concerns about the notion of protection of the route once it's identified. And there is a problem there that you're simply going to say, well, you can't do anything with your lands because we've got this idea of doing something in the future. And the future is very vague. And we've already experienced that with the GTA West Transportation Corridor, where some property owners have been told, well, you can't even get a building permit to put a deck behind the house because you're in the identified area. So what you're really doing is freezing people's lands. And back in the day, a Parkway Belt West plan that provided for the corridor for the 407 and Hydro, the province had to end up buying the land. And I think it's patently unfair to freeze people's lands with no compensation for possibly many decades. Do you have any comments on that perspective?
Thank you for the question. At this point in time, in this point of our study, we're really looking at MTO study area and working within that area for the most part. In the future, when we get to the point where MTO has defined a more concrete corridor, and then we are protecting land only exclusively for a transmission corridor, we'll have to keep those things in consideration, and there's going to be constant consultation again. So there'll be chances to raise those issues such as compensation and the mechanism by which we hold land, and even determining in what areas we should be holding land and which we shouldn't in the future. At this point, we hope to really just really tag along with MTO and their corridor study area while we can, and we're not imposing any great new land restrictions at this time.
Okay, could you tell us roughly how wide the transmission corridor might be?
Yes, the transmission corridor, a typical transmission corridor of this scope that we're envisioning for this need in the Peel Halton area is about 60 meters.
Okay, and how many towers? Just one row of towers or several?
At this point, that kind of detailed design has not been undertaken, and we want to retain flexibility to accommodate different types of design styles in the future. So that hasn't been determined at this point.
And how about the height of the towers?
For this question, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague at the ISO, Ahmed.
Right. So when it comes to the height of the tower, there's really lots of flexibility depending on what we're trying to achieve and what the needs of the nearby communities are. For a typical double circuit steel pole tower, it would be about, I would say, 95 to 135 feet high. But as I said, there's lots of flexibility in tower design, and the tower could be designed to meet most needs.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the reason why I held 15.1 is for 2 points. So the Brampton Callan Flight Center is key, and I know I was part of when you've had some meetings there as well, along with Minister Jones and the regional councillors. I do definitely want to encourage that they were there first, and it is the largest private training flight school in North America. So we don't want to jeopardize the training of the pilots with these hydro lines. So this is why we're really encouraging, if you're coming through that area, we're asking to have this buried and I want to be on record.
Mayor Thompson, you were really hard to hear.
Okay. Can you hear me now? No? Let me try something.
No, Alan, you sound good at our end. You sound good here in the council chamber. Councillor Sato's nodding no, but why don't you carry on and we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Can you hear me better this way? It's just I get a little bit of vibration back, but I'll try it this way. So what I want to do is make sure we're on record for the Brampton Flight Center, because it's a huge economic driver, both for the town and for the region. So we just want to make sure it's on there. And that's why I wanted 15.1 brought forward, Mr. Chair, is so that we identify that this is one of the requests that Callan is looking for. And I'm sure it's just as important for the region. Secondly, I want to ask you, Denmark, and I understand it's done in Poland as well, high-speed rail runs through runs in under the towers for the electric trains. And I know there was looking at a high-speed rail running with the 40 or this 413 proposal. Would your group entertain something of that concept when you said you're still out there for tower design to consider to run high-speed rail in your hydro corridor? Is that a possibility?
At this time, I would say that nothing is off the table. We haven't made any decisions about any kind of detailed design or anything like that. So nothing is scoped out. I mean, if you really look at where we are in the study area, even if we didn't have the study area, MTO is still studying that same corridor, basically. So at this very point in time, there's absolutely nothing off the table, and everything is open for discussion in the future.
Well, I think the Danes have it right in the way they run their electric trains through the towers. And I was just thinking going forward, and this is something that's got to be driven by the region, because we got to work with Halton and we got to work with York as well. So, Mr. Chairman, again, with 15.1, I just wanted to see if we can have that dialogue, especially for our future transportation needs, if this is a possibility that we can do this.
And Chair, Mayor, very good of you to raise it, and something that we've made them very much aware of. Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So I guess I just want to start by talking about the towers. While it's recognized that adequate electricity is necessary for communities, tall electric transmission towers are not seen as very desirable visually, the health infrastructure compatible with adjacent neighborhoods. Is it the province understanding that a hydro tower corridor in the heart of a future residential community makes good planning?
Thank you for the question. At this point, we do want to look at the actual electricity needs of regions and make sure they have the electricity they need to grow, but no specific design decisions have been made. We want to retain the flexibility to have different tower designs, underground, overground, and retain that flexibility for the future. And none of those decisions have been made at this point.
Okay, and so perhaps more expensive, but the province considered burying the electrical transmission lines in the ground? And would it not be prudent to measure financial costs to benefit of visual unsightliness and health impacts to the community by burying the lines? We learned from the COVID era that human health is significantly more costly than one-time infrastructure costs.
Yes, thank you for the question. Burying the lines is certainly an option, especially in sensitive areas or other areas. Those decisions are made more at the time when there's a transmission need that's been clarified and the scope has been set on the needs and a transmitter has been identified, and they go out and develop the project. They would go out, consult with communities, and get feedback such as aesthetics of design, of tower design, and undergrounding or above ground.
Sure, and I just hope that the province recognizes, the old technology in terms of what we're talking about with above ground lines, and the fact that there's other parts in the world that are currently experiencing or looking at the possibilities and even implementing the utilization of underground lines and electrifying either light rail or even charging lanes for electric vehicles. So I want us to be forward thinking here when we're talking about essentially a highway that may not be built for 20, 30 years. I guess my other questions that I have is if the highway does not happen in the region, does the transmission line, in particularly Northwest Brampton alone, make sense, or is the transmission line only viable if a future highway proceeds?
The transmission line would still be needed. However, the ISO would have to look at refreshing their demand forecast given a change into the area, for example, the highway, if it doesn't go through. And then we'd have to reevaluate our study, which might mean pausing the study, canceling the study, starting a new study. At this point, our study is very much dependent on the fact that the MTO is doing their study. If that point changes, we're going to have to start and reconsider our study, but the need for the electricity doesn't go away.
Okay, so then that being said, could the transmission lines be advanced independently prior to the highway?
They could be, and if it needs to be, they would be. Again, that opens up a whole new set of questions of where exactly the transmission line would go. Without, at this point, we've just been following the MTO corridor for land use planning purposes and efficiency. Without the MTO corridor, it would be a little bit more open in terms of where exactly the transmission line would go.
Sure. Okay. Just in your presentation, you talked a lot about just keeping the dialogue going with, the Heritage Heights, City of Brampton Region Appeal, Brampton Flying Club, Caledon, and I just encourage that to continue. All important players at the table, and we're only going to get one shot at this, and we need to get it right. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Downey.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Councillor Pelletier touched on most of the items for that southwest corner of Caledon as well. I just want to thank Samir and his team for coming out to the Flying Club and spending time with us. I was quite happy to be educated on their planning and how they, build their criteria for the work that they do, and consider, all of the community impacts. Samir and I had an opportunity to actually go up in one of the student planes and kind of look at the area and see how all of these pieces are fitting together. So I thank them for that. They did a great job, and we're very open to all of the aspects of the community and the important pieces and how they're fitting together with the highway. So just a thanks to them and their team.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I was a little surprised to see the expanded area, which takes up the northwest corner of my ward. Would have been nice to have had a little bit of advance notice other than the presentation. But I am very concerned because I just had a conversation with our staff on Tuesday, and we're starting the planning for the use of those lands, the Ninth Line lands, both on the east and west side of Ninth Line, which is right in that area. We can't proceed with much in design until we have an idea as to where the lines would be running, the transmission lines would be running. I do have the, guess it's the 43 kV transmission station in my ward along that area. And as a matter of fact, Councillor Starr was, I think he was chair of Hydro Mississauga at the time when we opened that particular facility. And so it goes back a very, very long time. But, we've had issues with changing legislation on the towers. And just a couple of years ago, the tower height was changed, or the regulation was changed for roadways for traffic running underneath these transmission lines. And it almost prevented us from building Argentia Road because we couldn't get the distance, we couldn't get the space without spending, I think it was $200 million to raise the towers. So I would hope that whatever planning is done going forward, it exceeds current regulations, because if they change, then I'd like to warn some of my colleagues that if you have roadways that may need to be built in the future underneath those lines, if they are overhead lines, you could run into very significant costs and problems if the rules change. So that's one issue. I mean, I don't have a problem with transmission lines leading from the existing station, because that's where it is, and we knew that. But I do have some residential that is within that area as well. There are two in particular homes that have been there, heritage properties. I don't want to see them impacted. A lot of business through there. And of course, with the 407 Transitway coming into the Lisgar GO station, I want to make sure that we're not losing any more lands around the Lisgar GO station for any additional towers. I doubt we would, because the towers run along there anyway. But I would like to get more information from you, if you could send me directly, as to what part of the lands in my ward you said that you've now looked at a reduced area, but I don't know what that reduced area is. So I would like to see some idea of what you are now proposing as a reduced area of interest, in that northwest corner of Mississauga. So if you could provide me directly with that. I guess mine's the only Mississauga area that looks like it's being impacted. So I would appreciate a little bit more detail on it. And I will be discussing it with our staff because I don't think some of our staff in one department don't seem to have been aware of discussions that have gone on from what I'm hearing. So I'm a little concerned about who the consultation was with, when it was done. So perhaps, Samir, we can discuss through some email or a phone call after this meeting.
Yes, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. And thank you for all that feedback. It's great feedback. And yes, we did have some conversations with Mississauga, City of Mississauga staff. And just because, we understand how important that land by the Ninth Line lands and that 401, 407 interchange is. We are looking at reducing that area, and we can provide you with more detailed maps. We haven't finalized all the decisions in that area yet, but we certainly are able to discuss and share more information and maps with you.
Okay, thank you. We were able to get the Ministry of Transportation to realign the 407 transitway so that it did not cut through those lands. It was going to really have a huge impact, and now they're running it under the railway into the Lisgar GO station, which really minimizes. And now to hear this, we get rid of one provincial interruption of our land's use, and now hearing this, it's quite concerning.
One comment, thanks for the feedback again. One comment I will make is preserving the land is the intent and goal is to minimize costs and environmental impact for everybody in the future. So if it's not achieving that goal, there's always a possibility of continuing our discussions and releasing land. If it's determined that certain land is not necessarily needed in the future, or we have sufficient flexibility without certain pieces of land, we can certainly always open to discussing that with you.
So, Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one final question? Have you notified the landowners that are in that area that their land is being considered as part of this corridor?
We've notified all the landowners. I don't know. I don't have with me the exact kind of area that we've notified, but we've identified all the landowners affected by our corridor study area directly.
Okay, could you just maybe confirm with me if the two residential properties in particular have been notified within the new area?
Yes, I can get back to you with that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation today. I guess my first question is, I understand the need to put in the transmission in areas of growth. How closely do you work with municipal affairs and housing or other regions and municipalities on their growth plans to identify this infrastructure in advance?
We do work with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing quite closely. And in terms of the actual need for the electricity and demand growth, I can turn it over to the ISO and Ahmed to talk about how they work with the distribution companies, municipalities to understand growth.
Hi, so when we do electricity planning, we create almost a working group that consists of us and all of the local distribution companies that supply power to the different municipalities and regions. And it's through those distribution companies that we get an idea of what the forecast is for demand over the next several years. We also do speak with municipalities and regions directly and to try to get an idea. And we also speak directly with industrial customers, but for the most part, we rely on the distribution companies to provide us with information on how they see the demand growing over the next 20 years.
Okay. And was there any thought or studies considered for local generation rather than use the existing transmission network?
Yes, that's always a consideration in electricity planning, is to look at what we call non-wire solutions, which are generation, embedded distributed generation, behind the meter generation, conservation, energy efficiency. All these options are always looked at. The unique aspect of this need, though, is it's occurring away from major electricity infrastructure. And for all those solutions that I mentioned, there needs to be some basic connectivity to the grid, which wouldn't exist if the growth is happening far away from major infrastructure. So I think there will be some need for a transmission line, but then we can minimize the need for that line or reduce the size of the line by using these other measures as well.
Okay. Now I don't have any further questions, just a couple of comments. I live fairly close to the hydro corridor in South Mississauga, and we've since made a very amazing trail out of it. So there are recreational space opportunities across the 403. In that hydro corridor, we also created the rapid bus transitway. So I think, for those folks who are concerned, there are also other public infrastructure opportunities other than just electricity along those corridors. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, Councillor Sato asked most of my questions. Thank you for that, Councillor Sato. I would ask, though, Samir, that you copy me on the response to Councillor Sato, because we do share the Ninth Line corridor. Of course, she is on the east side and I'm on the west, and there are future development opportunities going on in the west side. And I also have a concern, though, about the bus rapid transit that is going along the 407, because all the development that is going along there now with the plans, they keep changing their mind on the easement that'll be going along the west side. So I want to make sure that it's all coordinated. I had no idea about this either, although it doesn't directly impact me. It certainly will for any future development along the Ninth Line. So if you would just kindly copy me on the response and any future correspondence concerning that north end, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paleshi.
Sorry, I didn't remove my hand. My apologies, Mr. Chair.
And Councillor Sinclair, I have you again.
Sorry, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. That exhausts my list, Madam Clerk. I believe we're now dealing with the item itself. I'll thank Samar and Ahmed for their presentation, and also related item 15.1, and I believe you require a recorded vote.
Thank you. Motion moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Paleshi, that the comments outlined in the report of the Interim Commissioner of Public Works titled Northwest Greater Toronto Area Transmission Corridor Identification Study Update be endorsed. And further, that a copy of the subject report be forwarded to the Ontario Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, the Independent Electricity System Operator, the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, the City of Brampton, Town of Caledon, City of Mississauga, York Region, and Halton Region. Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie?
Yes, and please note that I'm leaving for a funeral and we'll be back in just over an hour.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demerla? Councillor Demerla? Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon? Councillor Dillon? Councillor Downey?
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini?
Yes, please.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves? Councillor Groves? Councillor Innes?
Yes.
Counselor Innes in favor. Counselor Kovac.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Kovac in favor. Counselor Mahoney.
Yes.
Counselor Mahoney in favor. Counselor McFadden.
In favor.
Counselor McFadden in favor. Counselor Medeiros.
Yes.
Counselor Medeiros in favor. Counselor Paleshi.
Yes.
Counselor Paleshi in favor. Counselor Raz.
Yes.
Counselor Raz in favor. Counselor Sato.
Yes.
Counselor Sato in favor. Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Santos in favor. Counselor Sinclair.
In favor.
Counselor Sinclair in favor. Counselor Starr.
In favor.
Counselor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
In favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Counselor Vicente.
Yes.
Counselor Vicente in favor. Carries. Thank you.
Thank you, that carries. And thank you for the presentation, Samir and Ahmed, and a lot more work to be done. Okay, that brings us to 7.2. I see Mayor Brown, and Mayor Brown, if I can get his attention, might like to introduce Deputation 7.2. Mayor Brown, you made us aware of this tech drive and a recycling process as it relates to technology. And so, Mayor Brown, if you would like to introduce the next deputant.
Sure. I think this would be interesting. Right now, obviously, technology and innovation are always opportunities, and are there's always diversions in our economy, and so I hope people enjoy this presentation.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, I don't know that Allison Canning. Allison, I hope you're up and ready to go. I don't see you on my screen. Oh, there she is. She's waving. Welcome, Allison. We're good to go. Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, mayors, councilors, staff, and guests. And first of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Brown so much for your support right here. It's a little nervous, but it definitely helps. So I'm going to start with my ask and then give a bit of background. So my ask today is for all the councilors and individuals present here to support a technology collection drive that's going to happen in Mississauga from July 20th to 24th. We need to kickstart the donation drive, and I'll give you some reasons behind that. So for the last 2 years, our nonprofit organization, Let's Get Together, has been working hard to help low-income families across Ontario, as well as individuals, access computers and laptops for home use. And this is for them to own. We saw the computers as a new backpacks, because I was seeing students doing essays on their cell phone, and it really didn't set them up for higher education. So over the last 2 years, as we grew and got to know our processes, we actually helped over 1,000 families now, and individuals across Ontario, from Sudbury to Waterloo to St. Marie. And we want to continue to do that. Our goal is for every household or individual and family across Canada by 2024 to have access to their own computer, not borrow, own computer and internet. Because as we know, it sets them up for success. And in particularly marginalized families, education is the key to breaking a cycle of poverty, which is our second phase. With COVID-19, obviously this highlighted the need for computers at home as most public places shut down. So that need continues to exist. But what happened also at the same time is donations from corporations as well as individuals abruptly stopped due to COVID-19 and the fear of spread. So we need to kickstart that. We are working with 3 computer organizations so that we can actually have not just a local, but also a national reach. Donations have dropped, and so we're here to kickstart it. The reason why I'm coming to your council right now, the Region Appeal, is I've noticed an increase of from families in the Region Appeal. And I think it's because, and I've been told, I don't know which school board, one of the school boards recalled some of their borrowed laptops, which is, we have to, maybe it had to be reghosted, whatever it may be. But again, it leaves these families in situations where they're still back at zero. So it is about ownership. So, but in order to do that, we need the computers. We need the laptops, and we need the everything. So on the 20th and 24th, we're very grateful to have the Raptors 905 offer support and to serve as a host site. It's going to be a drop-in. We'll have more information about the actual, whether it's going to be Paramount Fine Foods or the Sports Zone, and the hours of when people can drop off. And on our website, letsgettogether.ca, you'll have a list of all the equipment. And it's anywhere from business equipment, computers, laptop bags, everything. So our ask today is, we're a small organization, so I don't have the reach, is to have everyone here on board help us promote it, to get the equipment here, not only help the community, but also help our environment. And then work with us to create whether a 2 or 3 year strategy where we can eliminate the digital divide in the region of Peel. And we can do it. We have so many corporations, organizations, and the second ask is work with us to set up other tech events, a schedule of them, where we can anticipate how much equipment will come back, so how many pieces of equipment we can redistribute back to the community. The third ask is to work with the corporations. Corporations, private schools, all sorts of places recycle their business laptops every so many years. And many of them actually, I think this past January, when Microsoft discontinued supporting Windows 7, many companies said, okay, we're going to buy new computers. We're not going to upgrade our system. So there may be many companies out there who are sitting on, laptops just waiting to redistribute. We want to set up a schedule over the next 3-4 years of what laptops will be available, so we can recycle them responsibly, but then also at the same time, what can go out. I can say that the Region of Peel actually has already approved and agreed, so I've been working a bit behind the scenes. The support, they've run the initiative by their waste management team as well too, and didn't see any conflict or issues. So I'm here to speak to all the councillors, the mayors, Mr. Chair, to see how we can work together to eliminate this digital divide plan moving forward. And just to let you know, the ultimate goal is to help families pursue higher education. Part of the funds is to collect laptops and computers so we can give it back into the community, and this is at no cost. We do have an option with one of our companies where there is a cost, but these will be going back to the community at no cost. And second to that, we want to keep families connected to higher education. So part of the funds raised from other equipment that can't be repurposed is going to support a student parent mentorship program that's been developed by post-secondary students, primarily University of Toronto, Mississauga students. And it's to help them pivot and understand and adapt to the new landscape in education. And these post-secondary students want to help, have the experience, and would serve as a great ambassador for education and encourage people to continue to pursue higher education, whatever that may be. So, thank you so much. And that's my presentation.
Allison, thank you. And there's a question. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, thank you. And Allison, thank you very much. Can you explain a little bit for computers to be donated or whatever? I know some companies are sitting on them and storing them because they're worried about cybersecurity, even though they're swept. Can you explain a little bit how you prepare these computers that's okay? I think this is one of the key issues where people are saying, well, I've had confidential information that I don't want to get out there, and I want to guarantee there's credible people sweeping these things if you can do that. Can you expand on that, please?
Right. And that is a very big question. And on our website, we actually have a video from one of our companies, Electronics Recycling Association, which operates across Canada. And they have a hard disk drive shredder. And I think that's where most of the information is kept. And so they can shred it, and they actually provide it as a complimentary service. I believe when they go to corporations, they can bring even a portable shredder there as well too. On our website, we also offer tips on how individuals or residents can safely protect themselves by downloading as much of their personal equipment. But again, it comes down to, I think, the hard drive. The companies we do work with do deal with that. I'm not as tech savvy I'm here more to connect, but I can look more into that. But as I know, we have some of the information on our website. I'd be happy to connect, bring more resources to you via email on how they do it.
Okay, thank you. Allison, thank you very much for your presentation, and you've given us a marvelous flyer that speaks to it. It's very, very well done. All of council, I understand, has been provided with it, so everybody will be following up accordingly. Thank you very much for your presentation. Madam Clerk, I need a motion of receipt, I believe. Move, if there are any objections to that. Seeing none, as moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Daskell. All those in favor, carried. Allison, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the COVID reports. And what I'm going to suggest is, first up, item 8.1 is the presentation from Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Lawrence Lowe. And what I'm going to ask Lawrence to do at the same time, if we could move up item 8.3, related item 8.3, use of non-medical masks and face covering in enclosed public spaces. So Lawrence, if you could give us your usual update, which I understand is moving in a very positive direction, and this perhaps carry on with what you would have told us for 8.3, the face masks, and then I will open it up to any questions. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleasure to give my update, and good morning, members of council. In my update today, I will touch on a number of topics. First of all, I'll discuss where we are in the pandemic. Secondly, I'll discuss the recent requirements around masking. Thirdly, I will speak to the recent controversy in the media around the nature of transmission of COVID-19, as I know that there are lots of questions around that. And fourthly, I will update you on public health's ongoing response, as well as other operational changes that are being made in response to stage 2 reopenings. So firstly, where are we in the pandemic? We are solidly in the tail of the first wave of the pandemic here in the region of Peel and throughout the province of Ontario. Our 7-day moving average in the region continues to trend downwards. Healthcare testing and public health tracing capacity remain largely placed to respond. And at this time, I'm also happy to announce that only 4 long-term care homes in our region remain in outbreak, 2 of which are due to be declared over this week, and 2 of which are actually just single staff cases that were found on surveillance testing. So it does appear that our long-term care picture is finally coming to a resolution. We do continue to see transmission in large facilities and workplaces and household clusters, but even the magnitude of this is starting to slow, which is also a positive sign. However, it is important for me to stress that it's not quite over yet. As we continue to reopen, there will always be a risk of flares as people continue to mingle, as people increase their interactions. The hope is that with our expanded testing and tracing capacity, that closures in the future will be more targeted and localized, such as to a specific workplace, an office building, a factory, rather than having to close down the community again, as happened in March. And in order to ensure that we continue to make the most of that, we do need residents to continue being vigilant, continuing the core 4 behaviors around hand washing, distancing, wearing a non-medical mask, and also staying home and getting tested if they are sick. We also need employers to take precautions. Peel Public Health is continuing our webinar series. I'll be speaking with the Caledon Economic Development Office tomorrow. Spoke with the Mississauga Chamber of Board of Trade a couple weeks ago, and Brampton Board of Trade, as I understand, is also coming up in the next couple weeks. But we do need employers to make use of resources that are available online from the Ministry of Labour and Training, Skills and Development, and also from the Region of Peel at peelregion.ca/coronavirus. Really updating a reopening plan, putting precautions in place. And I can also mention that this continues to be now the predominant reason why people are calling our call centers here at the Region of Peel. We're fielding a significant amount of questions around reopening, and certainly those resources are available online, and I'm very pleased to see that people are taking those seriously. We continue to discuss with the province on isolation facilities, though they do seem to be less required now as the household clusters start to slow. But at least having that framework in place may be helpful for deployment in a second wave. And travelers, as you all know, must continue to quarantine under federal bylaws and orders. And this is particularly important given the growing crisis in the United States. Colleagues in the United States have advised me that in a number of U.S. states, hospitals are at or near capacity, that especially in Arizona, for example, Patients are being transferred out of Arizona to other states because hospitals do not have the capacity to deal with the situation that is occurring there. And so really the importance of having travelers that are returning to stick with federal quarantine requirements is important, especially if they've traveled to places where there is widespread community transmission in the United States or elsewhere. Provincial tables are continuing discussions around the border that I spoke to in my update last week. And within our community, we are continuing to reach out to, in particular, the transport and logistics industry, where those essential workers don't necessarily need to quarantine, but should be still taking precautions, particularly if they are crossing the border. And I'll be speaking tomorrow morning at a meeting around goods movement together with Chair Yanika and our public works colleagues. So that is an update of where we are in the pandemic and where things are at. In respect of face coverings, I issued a recommendation on June 30th. This was really in respect of responding to community requests from businesses and residents for clarity and consistency on what was already a strong recommendation based on the evidence that has evolved with our understanding of the virus and the importance of wearing a non-medical mask where distancing is not possible due to pre-symptomatic spread of the virus. Bringing masking up as an overall community intervention together with the rest of the core 4 behaviors is critical. It will help us close out the first wave in our community and bring us closer to that goal of 0 daily new cases and hopefully stopping transmission in the first instance, together with distancing, hand washing, and people staying home if they are sick. I certainly do recognize that there are people who cannot wear a mask due to medical reasons. The bylaws that you have all supported, or many of you have supported at the local level, provide for an exemption and simply allow those individuals to state so if they are asked. I would say on that line that I very much urge the community to continue to be patient with each other and respectful. There's no need for vigilantism. I think stigma and discrimination has certainly been an issue throughout the pandemic. Whether it's been targeted against individuals of a certain cultural or ethnic community, and now, as I understand, individuals who may be unable to wear masks for medical reasons. I think the most important thing that I would encourage our community and would request Council's assistance in amplifying is the need for us to be kind, to be respectful, to remember the golden rule. I recognize that this is a bit of a difficult time for everyone. If someone's not wearing a mask due to an exemption, you can always distance yourself from them as well for safety as you are able. And so all that said, though, I think it's a positive thing that we've moved to a requirement. Ideally, the more people who take up the practice consistently and wear face coverings properly, the further ahead we will be. And again, this bylaw is meant to be temporary. It's meant to really encourage the behavior, particularly as we're looking to push ourselves in towards stage 3 and through the tail of the first wave. And certainly we'll make different considerations, and I will update my advice as our future continues to evolve. Speaking just about the controversy around transmission, many of you will have noticed in the media that there was a recent controversy around whether this is a droplet or an aerosol disease in terms of COVID-19. This is really just a definitional debate between fluid dynamics and aerosol dynamic scientists and virologists. And I would use the analogy that you have a new cat that has spots, and it looks somewhere between a leopard and a cheetah. It's leopard-like in most instances and cheetah-like in rare circumstances. So how do you classify that new animal? It's important to remember that droplet and aerosol is a gradient and a spectrum. And it's really about how big the droplets are and whether they can suspend or linger in the air. And that is where, in terms of droplets, we come up with the 1.52 meter radius that's based on studies. Aerosols typically are smaller particles that can linger and can pass over a further distance, usually about 6 to 8 meters. Now, it has always been known since the outbreak began that under certain conditions, coronavirus can linger, usually with medical procedures that generate aerosols, such as when you're putting a tube into someone to help them breathe, and also in certain poorly ventilated spaces indoors, which is where super spreading events have been seen to occur. However, that is a semantic definition. In general, it is a droplet transmitted disease. And overall, in terms of the rare instances where it does linger, where an aerosol has been generated, it hasn't appreciably changed how we approach the virus. I mean, distancing and wearing a non-medical mask indoors for source control, these help to prevent the creation of droplets and the transmission of droplets ultimately. So it's really a definitional debate where in certain instances, it's like a cheetah, but in most instances, it's like a leopard. So that I wanted to share around the transmission because I know there have been questions around that. And finally, to close off, I'll mention where we are with our public health operations. We're in the process of identifying and trying to move most of our COVID operations back into our communicable disease division. This is going to take place over the next few months. We're also continuing to shore up our surveillance, tracing, outbreak, and infection control capacity in anticipation of a second wave. And we're also in the process of evaluating the response of the first wave and also continuing to evaluate the data that we've collected to date and continue to release those through our weekly epidemiologic summaries. And as we reopen, we are also launching a few new things. So first of all, we are going to be one of the first health units to launch the new provincial case and contact management solution. This is expected to come online next week, and it will essentially, it's a game changer because it will allow labs to directly report into an information technology solution, and then for our staff to basically immediately begin contact tracing. And then, of course, data pulls can actually be taken directly from that solution as well. So it eliminates the need for manual entry of data. It eliminates the need for fax and for letter contact from labs around results. And I think it will certainly change the way we do case and contact management and also put us in good stead for a second wave. In terms of other core public health changes, we are returning a number of inspectors who were redeployed to reopen our vector-borne disease program around West Nile virus, West Nile virus and Lyme disease surveillance. We're also redeploying inspectors to undertake provincially mandated public health inspections to permit reopening of recreational water, swimming pool settings, personal service settings, and also some food premises. We have also started, following the passage of the report last week, to bring back staff to begin planning for the Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program rollout. We are augmenting our healthy sexuality clinic services with virtual physician visits at our Fairview clinic. And we are also restarting vaccine order desk and fridge inspections to ensure that providers are approved for expected volumes of flu vaccine orders to come in the fall. As we restart all these services, I certainly ask Council to support our message and request to the community for patience. We are obviously bringing as many redeployed staff as we can to provide the service, but certainly we're also balancing an ongoing pandemic response. So that is my update today, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to take questions from Council at this time.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson. Alan, Mayor Thompson, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Lowe, I've got some requests with people that have health issues, can't wear a mask because either they're on oxygen or whatever, but we're asking why we weren't allowing face shields to be that alternative for people that can't wear a face mask and why that wasn't included in the bylaw. Is this something we can consider? Because it's a good point.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. At this point, and through you, Mr. Chair, at this point, the evidence around face shield use in the general public is even more scant than the use of face masks, because as you know, they're a fairly futuristic looking technology that's shown up in the public just over the last couple months. So the evidence wasn't strong enough to include them as a potential piece in the bylaw. But that said, for individuals who have challenges wearing a mask and wish to wear a face shield, there's nothing stopping them from wearing a face shield. And my hope would be that we get some clear evidence as to whether they're effective for source control in the coming months as they continue to be used in the population. And those individuals can wear a face shield and speak to the idea that, well, I'm not wearing a mask because I have an exemption, but I am wearing a face shield because I do respect what's going on.
Thank you for that. That's what patients what they're looking for. So I wonder if that's something we can message out as councillors as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Lowe. Good update. I always enjoy listening to you. Now, again, for Mayor Thompson, I'm finding it really hard to hear. I know he just asked about face masks. So can I get clarity on if somebody wore a shield that they would comply with the bylaws, correct? So it's not recommended, but they are allowed. Like I was asked the question, are face shields allowed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor Raz, for the question. So if an individual is wearing only a face shield and not a face mask, they would not necessarily be in compliance with the bylaw, because the bylaw, I think, specifies that it has to be something that covers the mouth and the nose, a face covering of some variety. So it could be a bandana, it could be a scarf, could be a face mask. But I think the answer that I was giving to Mayor Thompson was, if someone has a medical exemption or is unable to wear a face mask and wishes to wear a face shield, there's nothing preventing them from wearing a face shield. It's just that at this time, a face shield does not count as compliance with the bylaw, because the evidence for general public use of face shields is still being studied at this time, and we can't quite categorize it in the same way as we would with face masks at this time.
Okay, are we updating our Q&As to reflect that? Because I think a lot of councillors will probably get that question over the next few days.
Thank you, Councillor Raz, and through you, Mr. Chair, I can advise our communications team that we can ensure that is in the Q&A to clarify, to make very clear that face masks, while they don't meet the intent of the bylaw or compliance for the purposes of the bylaw, if someone wishes to wear one, there's nothing preventing them from doing so, and if they're not wearing a mask, explaining why they're only wearing a face shield.
Okay, and my next question, what kind of conversations are you having with the federal government on border reopening? I'm only asking because we do have the GTAA in Peel region, and once they start opening that borders, our residents that work in airport supported industries and around the airport, and we get exposed to those travelers, that increases our risk for Peel residents and beyond. So I'm just wondering if you've had those conversations.
So thank you, Councillor Raz, and through you, Mr. Chair. We are in regular contact with our quarantine office colleagues at Pearson Airport, and we are also in touch with the GTAA. I believe they came and presented to myself and the CAO and Chair Yanika recently around their the Healthy Airport initiative that they're undertaking. And so on that point, at least specific to the airport, we're working there. I haven't had any broader conversations with federal colleagues, but I have been in contact with provincial colleagues just around the border. I've been speaking, for example, with the Medical Officer of Health in Niagara and other places, together with our Chief Medical Officer of Health here in Ontario. And we're looking at things that were done, for example, in Alberta, where I think at a provincial level, there were also additional resources deployed to borders, particularly airports. And we're studying everything that's been done in anticipation of any decision that may come down from the border. So I guess the short answer is we're continuing our conversation with Quarantine Office and the GTAA, and also with provincial counterparts who are also, I believe, in contact with our federal.
Excellent, thank you. Sideswiped and surprised that they're suddenly open, and we're, as a local municipality, unprepared. So thank you very much, Dr. Lowe.
Thank you, Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe, for another excellent report and information. Following up on Councillor Raz's question on could you provide us with a little facts Q&A, could you give us something that we can send out to residents when they send us a long list of scientific links proving that face masks don't do anything at all? I think we all get them from people who claim to be experts, and some of them are in the scientific field, some are in the medical field, some are just residents who read it on Facebook, read it on Google, and it has to be, absolutely accurate. It's an expert opinion. And some of these are, put out by people with PhDs or doctor in front of their names. So, and it's really hard for us, my response is we take our advice from our expert, which is yourself and the other medical officers of health. But then some people will come back and, well, I'm an expert and, your experts are wrong, kind of thing. So it would be really nice to have a simple answer that we can send without getting into a big discussion, because we're not the experts. So, can you do something like that for us?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Sato, for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely happy to look into this with our communications team. I know that communications and education, as you've seen in the report before you today around the masking requirement, is going to be a part of this. And so perhaps what can be done is basically putting up a website that speaks to the evidence, the recommendation, how it's all rolling out, and then maybe the response just says, "Thank you for your question." Refer you on to the website, and certainly on to us at Peel Public Health if they have any further questions. I can say I get the same emails as well. So certainly we can look into that as part of the communications and education campaign.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick follow up on the face shield issue. I know you've said that there's no evidence yet that they do protect. Are there studies being done on the efficiency of a face shield? Even though, we know that dentists wear the face shield, so they have to provide some type of protection. But I guess maybe at this point you don't know if they provide the protection from this particular virus.
So thank you, Councillor Sato, through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. It's the sense that face shields are actually typically designed to protect the eyes of the wearer. And with the opening at the bottom, it's not clear whether droplets can pass, or particularly if it's not worn well, whatever the case might be. So I think the general public use of face shields, especially since it's so new, is why the evidence hasn't really come out just yet. In respect of specific studies being done, I have to believe that there are studies being done, even though I can't necessarily point to specific ones now. There are hundreds and hundreds of COVID-19 research studies that are currently being undertaken. I would imagine that face shields, particularly given their propagation throughout, not just in Canada, but in many other settings around the world, are probably being actively studied. And we will continue to monitor the literature and evidence and research for any published findings that may point one way to another as to how we might recommend them for a specific purpose.
Okay, and one final question. Sorry, I'm echoing here. One final question with regard to the way of wearing a mask. I had read, I think it was on the CDC website, that when you put on the pleated masks, which are the ones that I was making, that when you put them on, you should have the pleats pointing down so that the droplets don't come in from the top and gather. Is that accurate? Is that something we should be advising people? Because I've seen a lot of people wearing them the other way. So.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Sato. That is the recommendation, I think, around pleated masks specifically. In general, though, the advice is really just making sure that people are wearing and have some sort of physical barrier over the nose and the mouth. So, why not? I'm happy to take that back and confirm with my team just to sort of look into the pleated question as well. And then if we need to message it, I'll be able to communicate that.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kovac.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Hope everybody can hear me okay. Just wanted to thank you, Dr. Lowe, for everything that you've done for us as a council, and for obviously your the messaging that you have provided. It's a little bit of a difficult time, but I know that you and all of council are very much wanting to protect the health, safety, and well-being of all residents in Peel Region. Yesterday at Mississauga Council, we had a vote. I had a differing opinion, but the same opinion as far as wanting to ensure that we're united in protecting, to the best of our abilities, the health, safety, and well-being of all the residents. It was more from an enforcement standpoint. I question whether we will really be able to effectively enforce this measure, and then sort of what will the ramifications be by our being unable to effectively enforce? Will we have more confrontations out and about? So I worry about that. And I also worry about, the messaging has been very much be hygienic, be clean, limit to the best of your abilities hand-to-face contact. And I'm thinking with facial coverings, undoubtedly there's going to be a lot more hand-to-face contact as a result of there being, let's be honest, a little bit more uncomfortable. and rubbing up against the skin. The average person touches their face in between 15 to 30 times an hour. So, the situation where you might be outdoors, not required to wear it, then you're indoors for a moment, you put it on, and you might not have sanitizer or the ability to wash your hands while you're doing that. So I could see a situation like that unfolding. And I just hope that there won't be a false sense of security where people feel safe and then they broach that, 6 feet or 2 meter distance. So we just need to do a really good job of educating, and I'm more from that end. Thinking that we need to do a good job on the education piece. As far as increased risk of infection, I have no medical expertise, so I don't want to wade into that territory, but some, like Dr. Kulvinder Gill, not too familiar with, did speak yesterday at council, and obviously she shares a different opinion on that, believing that there's a potentially greater chance that residents could get infected by wearing something that limits breathing and in turn increasing toxic inhalation or toxin inhalation. But I don't want to get into that area. I was more about enforcement, and also from an equity standpoint, are there going to be many persons who have disabilities, non-visible disabilities, who, will the business owner card them effectively by asking them, and then either they themselves or their parent are going to be put in that position where they're going to have to explain. They'll have other people staring at them. So very uncomfortable about that. And I think when and where it's possible to educate, I think we could be doing that over the enforcing, but I see that we're already going in that direction. My question to you is, you might be familiar, Dr. Lowe, yesterday at Niagara Regional Council, I understand that there was a polarizing deliberation that lasted almost 5 hours, and the two mayors, one of St. Catharines, Senjik was a proponent, and Jim Diodati, mayor of Niagara Falls, taking a different position, believing that my approach has always been, I'd rather catch somebody doing something right and reward that behavior rather than catching them doing something wrong and punishing them. I don't believe the stick is the best approach. That's the mayor of Niagara Falls, obviously a tourist attraction, and he took that opinion. Many members of regional council yesterday asked Dr. Mustafa Hirji, a colleague of yours, why he didn't support the restriction, and he just reminded them that it's not a case closed type of situation. It is evolving. The information is evolving. And as of right now, there are 26 medical officers of health in Ontario who are not proposing this face covering restriction. And he said, so there's definitely some debate around us as a group, Dr. Hirji said, but I think that's what you're seeing, that there's local variation in terms of what is the level of risk in the community, but also variation in terms of the greatness of the science right now. And just if you might be willing to comment on that.
So thank you, Councillor Kovac, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly happy to comment on that. I think both the Public Health Agency of Canada and the World Health Organization have been very clear that any decision or discussion around masking requirements should be left to local health authorities, and really in respect of their understanding of the case and the context of the community. Certainly, as I would agree with Dr. Hirji that the science is not definitive, but at least in terms of the evolution, both in terms of the studies and the research that have come out in the 6 months that we've learned about this disease, and in particular, not just around the use of masks, but the use of masks together with the rest of the core 4 behaviors, such as hand washing, etc., which addresses part of the issue. If you're using a mask, you should also be washing your hands so that any increased face touching, you're eliminating the risk there, as well as the actual understanding of the transmission of COVID-19 has really started to point to how a non-medical mask may be used. And so this is why the recommendation has changed so much. In February, when the initial recommendation came out, it was made on the basis of other respiratory viruses, influenza, et cetera, that don't transmit before symptoms come on. In March and April, we moved to a permissive recommendation as the evidence started to unfold a bit more. But our focus then was really getting people to stay home. But it was a permissive recommendation that if you're brewing a COVID infection, you may wear a non-medical mask, to address that and to reduce the risk of transmitting to others. That moved to a strong recommendation in early May as we moved to reopening, because we did recognize that in certain settings where physical distancing is not possible, and physical distancing really is still one of the cornerstones as well, that wearing a non-medical mask may provide an additional benefit to reducing community transmission by, again, reducing the risk of droplets emerging at the source. And so this continues to be something that is being studied. The recommendation has changed as the science and the understanding has evolved. And I think, Councillor Kovac, I would absolutely agree with you. We share the same goal in terms of making sure that, to the extent possible, this is about education rather than enforcement. Similar to other things such as speed limits, such as wearing seatbelts, there are always challenges in enforcing those. But I think for the most part, we've seen our community do the right thing through this pandemic, and I'm sure those that are able will be able to do the right thing. And that also includes making sure that they are not stigmatizing or discriminating individuals who may not be able to wear a mask for whatever reason as well. I think that was why in my remarks I said it's important for us to be kind, to be respectful. Certainly stigma and discrimination has been a challenge throughout different phases of these pandemics directed at different people in our community, and certainly a challenge. So I think it's really about making sure that masks or other face coverings are used, are worn appropriately, are done in conjunction with the other core 4 behaviors. And certainly in terms of our approach, the focus really being on education rather than enforcement, speaking both to how the masks can be used, how it should be handled in the community, and really for people to be kind and patient with each other. These are difficult times. So thank you, and to the chair and to Councillor Kovac again.
And thank you for your comments, Dr. Lowe. Trying to keep us all safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to thanks Dr. Lowe for the presentation. I wanted to confirm what I had confirmed yesterday at Council, that when there's somebody that's interacting with the public that is working in, say, like a convenience store or a grocery store, and they're protected by the plexiglass, their job requires them to, not only be on their feet, but to be there for maybe 6, 7, 8 hours. And as long as they're protected by that plexiglass, they don't have to wear the mask that could, cause potential heat exhaustion. It's hot in some grocery stores and convenience stores and stuff like that. Just want to confirm that bylaw doesn't, it exempts them from wearing the mask.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I would actually defer to the solicitor on this one, whether the plexiglass enclosure would be considered not ordinarily accessible to the public.
Patrick on.
Patrick.
While we're waiting for Patrick, really quickly, Dr. Lowe, I had recently saw a video, and it was done through, it was used, some kind of camera was used to, you were able to actually see the person's breath when they weren't wearing a mask, and how far it went out. And they were saying it was measured by the moisture in the breath. And then when the person put a mask on, you could see the breath again coming out from the mask. And of course it was a lot less. And then they also had used a face shield, and you could see that the breath was coming out the sides and the bottom, and still a lot more than a mask. I'll try and find it. I don't remember where I saw it, but I'll certainly try and find it and send it to members. It was a really good video to watch, to see how far your breath, just when you're speaking, can carry through the room.
Thank you. I see Patrick. Patrick, did you understand the question, or do you need it repeated? Patrick, I don't know if you may be muted. I see you on my screen. I think you're speaking, but I can't hear you. So to Patrick O'Connor, are you muted, or can you hear us?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you can hear me, but
now we're good to go. Go ahead.
Difficult. Okay, I did hear the question, and my interpretation.
Sorry, Patrick, you're coming in and out. As at the moment, Patrick, we can't hear you. I know the technical folks here, perhaps it's just a bad connection.
Mr. Chair, I have no further questions. I'll yield and see if we can get Patrick back on after.
Very good. Thank you. So, Patrick, I'll give you one last chance. Why don't you try one more time to see if you can answer the question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, my interpretation of the bylaws would be that an individual behind a plexiglass and occupying space to which the public does not have access would not have to wear the mask under the bylaw.
Very good. Okay, thank you. That exhausts my list, Madam Clerk. So we are now dealing with item 8.1, 8.3 that I know are here for a receipt, and related item 9.4. And we have a resolution, Madam Clerk, so for 8.3. So Madam Clerk, we're in your hands for the resolution.
Thank you. A motion moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Paleshi, that enactment of temporary municipal bylaws by the City of Brampton, City of Mississauga, and Town of Caledon be to require non-medical masks, face coverings in enclosed public spaces in accordance with the advice of the Region of Peel Medical Officer of Health be endorsed. And further, that the Region of Peel Medical Officer of Health continue to direct public health efforts that encourage community compliance with the wearing of mask, face covering in the manner and to the extent provided for under such bylaw. And further, that the provincial government be requested to adopt a complementary mask regulation applicable to enclosed public spaces under provincial jurisdiction within the Region of Peel, including all public transit systems operated privately or by provincial agencies. And further, that the Government of Canada be requested to adopt complementary mask requirements applicable to enclosed public spaces under federal jurisdiction within the Region of Peel. And further, that an education campaign to inform business owners and operators and Peel residents of the new mask face covering requirements be implemented to coordinate with the local municipalities. And we'll call the vote. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Councillor Demurla.
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes.
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
No, I'm sorry. No.
Councillor Kovac opposed. Councillor Mahoney.
Yes, of course.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden.
Yes, I am.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi in favor. Councillor Raz.
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato.
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
Yes.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
Favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us down to COVID-related matters 8.2, aligning 2020 Community Investment Program to COVID-19 post-recovery efforts, and related item 19.1. We don't have a presentation. It's here for information. Does anybody have any questions with regards to it? So we're good, Madam Clerk. Do you have a resolution? Go ahead.
For 8.2, thank you. A motion moved by Councillor Santos and seconded by Councillor Downey that the recommendations as outlined in the report of the Commissioner of Human Services titled Aligning 2020 Community Investment Program to COVID-19 Post-Recovery Efforts be endorsed and implemented. Call the vote. Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie? Oh, sorry, she's absent. Councillor Demurla.
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey. Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes.
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney. Councillor Mahoney. Councillor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi in favor. Councillor Raz.
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato.
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
Yes.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
In favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Thank you.
Madam
Thank you.
Clerk, Councillor Mahoney's screen has frozen. He's saying he is in favor.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Noted accordingly, and thank you. I see we're on to 8.4 and 8.5, and Councillor Parrish was involved on both of those, but I have some other presentations, and she hasn't announced her arrival. I'm going to hold on to those and we'll...
Mr. Chair,
Councillors.
sorry, Councillor Parrish has a health issue that she's down at the hospital right now. She thought she would be out, but she's going to be a while longer. So I've asked her what she wants done with those items. So maybe if we can put them off until I hear back from her, and then I think her motion should go forward. I would be pleased to move it for her if that's possible.
Pat, what I'll do is suggested I was going to hold it anyway. When I get to the last possible moment that I can hang on, I'll put it back on the floor.
Okay, I'm thinking she may not make it at all today, Mr. Chairman.
I understand. We'll be as
but
patient
I'll find out what she wants done.
And as I say, I'll be as patient as I can on anything that she's a signatory to. But when I get to the end of, as long as I can wait, we have to get on with the business of the day.
No, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm holding 8.4, 8.5, brings me to communications item, the one that was held, item 9.3, regarding Patrick Brown, Mayor City of Brampton, letter dated June 24, 2020, providing a copy of a letter to the Federal Minister of Infrastructure and Communities regarding a national active transportation and COVID-19 economic stimulus package that Councillor Santos asked to be held. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, I asked it to be held because I've had a number of conversations with other regional councillors as well as other GTHA mayors and councillors in various organizations. During COVID-19, the city of Brampton had implemented some temporary bike lanes back in April to accommodate physical distancing between pedestrians and cyclists to relieve the crowding on the trails and to create a safer way for cyclists to use the road infrastructure. And what we're finding is that, in fact, Mayor Crombie, in her announcements today, had also mentioned an expansion of active transportation in Mississauga. And I certainly know that my colleagues in Caledon also support the same thing, especially with our work at the TRCA with Chair Innes there, and also with Annette Groves, Joanna, and Alan Thompson. So the premise of this letter is to advocate to the federal government as they are making plans for economic stimulus funding, specifically in infrastructure, to set aside a certain amount of money dedicated to support active transportation across the country, and more specifically in large urban municipalities like Brampton, Mississauga, and the region of Peel, to include Caledon. And so what I just wanted to share is that probably the next regional council, I'll be bringing forward a similar motion that was passed by the city of Brampton for the region to also write a letter. And in some conversations with regional councillors, which I'll bring up later when we discuss development charges, I think we also need to look at changes to development charges and what we're allowed to pay for, because it seems to be that the majority of the assumptions when it comes to development charges is about growth, paying for road infrastructure, specifically to prioritize car traffic. And as we see with the number of accidents, speeding, etc., that doesn't seem to be working. The more roads we build, it seems like the more problems we are facing. So I'm hoping, I just wanted to share that with everyone, and I'm hoping that folks will support the motion coming forward at our next council. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Peleshi, you're still on my list. Did you have something further on this subject? I'm thinking it's when he acknowledged that Councillor Mahoney wanted to vote, so I'll carry on. Which brings us to 10, staff presentations. Item 10.1, Region of Peel Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program related to Reports 10.3 and Bylaw 49/2020. Presentation by Nahida Jamal, Acting Manager, Policy Development, Regional Planning and Growth Management, and Nick Michael, Partner at N. Barry Lyon Consultants. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of Council. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the proposed Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program. The presentation is accompanied by Staff Report 10.1 on today's agenda. Presenting with me is Nick Michael, Partner at N. Barry Lyon Consultants, who has considerable experience in developing and supporting incentive programs and has been working with us on this project. We are very pleased to be bringing forward the proposed Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program today, which is the result of many months of hard work and collaboration from staff across the region and with our local municipal partners. Next slide, please. In terms of background, in 2018, Regional Council endorsed the Peel Housing and Homelessness Plan. The Peel Housing and Homelessness Plan, or PHHP, includes 5 strategies in order to address the long-term outcomes of making affordable housing available and to prevent homelessness for Peel residents. Strategy 3 of the PHHP focused on providing incentives to private and nonprofit developers for the provision of affordable housing, with the immediate action to bring forward a framework for the incentives-based program. The pilot program we will be describing today is the response to that action. Before we get into the proposed pilot program details, I would like to note that N. Barry Lyon Consultants is also supporting the region and the local municipalities with work on inclusionary zoning. The inclusionary zoning project is distinct from the work we are describing today. Staff is currently working to develop a regional and local municipal inclusionary zoning framework, and much of this work will be taking place this year. As part of the Peel 2041 Regional Official Plan Review, we are also working on housing policies and implementation. The Affordable Housing Pilot Incentives Program is one important element of implementation. Next slide, please. The objective of the proposed Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program is to increase the supply of affordable rental housing units for middle-income households, with a focus on building larger family-sized rental units. The focus comes from analysis undertaken as part of the Housing Needs Assessment, which informed the Peel Housing and Homelessness Plan. It identified the need for larger family-sized rental units. We also see this program as complementing other regional programs and services that address deeper affordability needs, such as the construction of new affordable housing through the Housing Master Plan. We expect to test the conditions of the pilot program over time to better understand how it is serving our housing objectives. We would like to establish a regular criteria-based, predictable, one-door application process to receive incentive requests. We would like to see how the market is responding to this pilot program, and we look forward to working with the private and not-for-profit developers to participate and increase the supply of affordable rental housing in Peel. Based on the pilot program and its implementation, we do intend to make any adjustments and improvements as needed. We also looked at designing the pilot program to work with incentives from other levels of government as they become available, and we are working closely with our local municipal staff to support the program. The contribution of incentives through participation from other levels of government will support the viability of the program overall and ensure a streamlined approach to providing incentives for the development community. At this time, I will turn it over to Nick to describe the background analysis that supported the proposed design of the pilot program. Next slide, please.
That's great. Thank you, Nahida. So we began our work on this project through a financial assessment and business case analysis that explored the feasibility of developing an incentive program to encourage the delivery of affordable housing. And essentially what we did is we assessed a variety of hypothetical development case studies across the region. So for example, a tall tower in Mississauga City Centre, perhaps a mid-rise building in Mount Pleasant and Bolton. And we then ran financial pro forma analyses on these case studies, utilizing our market research to account for pricing levels in different market areas across the region. We ran the pro forma without affordable housing and then with affordable housing to understand the negative impact that including affordability will have on the developer's pro forma. And a negative impact occurs because the revenue a developer will receive will decrease by including units at below market rates, but the cost to construct affordable and market housing is more or less around the same. We did this analysis for both low and middle income rental and ownership housing, and also for private developers and nonprofit organizations. The analysis allowed us to understand the subsidy that might be necessary for nonprofit and for-profit organizations to move forward with a viable housing project. Overall, our analysis concluded that pursuing affordable rental housing is the best option for this program, which was based on several factors. For one, affordable ownership is generally a one-time affordability play, where that affordable unit price reverts to market pricing once that initial homeowner sells their home. Whereas with affordable rental housing, the home will remain affordable for an extended period of time, usually around 25 years, depending on the agreement structure. There's also significant funding programs through senior levels of government for affordable rental, as Nahida just mentioned, including the very popular Rental Construction Financing Initiative that's delivered through the National Housing Strategy that offers very low-cost financing. These programs can be combined with the incentive program we're presenting here today. There's also just not enough rental housing in Peel Region, really at all depths of affordability, so everything from market to low-income rental housing, resulting in very high rents, very low availability and vacancy. Overall, we recommended middle income over low income housing because it's very expensive to subsidize low income rental housing, but also because Peel Region is engaged in other strategies that already seek to address low income housing. Middle income households, on the other hand, are also facing significant affordability challenges in Peel, but generally these households do not qualify for other housing programs, leaving many of these people in a very precarious situation. We can go to the next slide, please. We also completed a best practice analysis for affordable housing incentive programs in Ontario. The analysis assessed the use of both the community improvement plan, but also municipal capital facility bylaw as the mechanism for delivering incentives. Overall, our work recommended the use of the municipal capital facility bylaw over a CIP because this mechanism offers much greater flexibility than a community improvement plan and is increasingly being used by other municipalities for these reasons, including the City of Toronto's highly successful Open Door affordable housing program. The municipal capital facility bylaw also allows local municipalities to participate in the program, where they offer their own incentives in concert with the region. This would obviously be very highly desirable because it allows the region and each local municipality to concentrate public capital dollars in a strategic and coordinated manner, which also offers greater certainty to developers who would otherwise have to separately apply for both regional and local incentives to achieve the same outcome. Overall, the work will also provide valuable, or has provided valuable insights as to how other incentive programs are designed, what works and what doesn't work, effectively learning from the experience of others. And I'll also just note that other municipalities are also now looking for ways to encourage more middle-income rental housing, including the Region of York's Underdevelopment CIP program. This is because affordability issues are no longer only a low-income discussion, with many middle-income households also struggling to find housing that's appropriate to their needs and also affordable to their needs. And when I say appropriate, I mean a family of 5 not living in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Next slide, please. So as we move towards project or program design, we begin with eligibility requirements. These are the requirements that applicants must have to be eligible for receiving incentive. Firstly, a project must be purpose-built rental. The building can have a mix of both affordable and market rate units. However, only the affordable units will be eligible for an incentive, of course. The definition of affordability is set at the upper end of Peel's middle-income household band, which was identified by your housing strategy and housing and homelessness plan. This equates to approximately 170% of the CMHC median market rent, which is a very similar threshold that's being targeted by York Region's middle-income rental program that's under development. The Peel Housing Strategy also found that the demand profile of households with middle-income band predominantly require family-size units. So we're also proposing that the affordable homes be delivered primarily through 2 and 3 bedroom units. We don't want a large proportion of small bachelor and 1-bedroom suites. The entire building must remain rental in tenure, and the affordable units must remain affordable for at least 25 years. As Nahida mentioned, both nonprofit and for-profit developers and organizations are eligible to apply, and they may also partner together on an application. And I'll also just note that successful organizations will be required to conduct income verification at occupancy and unit turnover and provide proof to the region each year to ensure that only eligible middle-income households are occupying these homes. We don't want high-income households occupying these units and getting a break on rent at the expense of public capital dollars. Next slide, please. So while applicants will be required to meet certain criteria to be eligible, other factors will also be used to score and prioritize applications, which we refer to here as preferred criteria. So again, while the minimum eligibility criteria will be that 170% of the median market rent in 25 years, applications will be scored much higher if they provide deeper and longer affordability. A project will also receive additional scoring if they are nearby features that middle-income households require, such as transit, amenities, schools, things like that, as well as offering amenities on site and incorporating accessibility and energy and environmental features above and beyond building code requirements. A value for money analysis will also be undertaken utilizing a tool that I've created for the region to evaluate the financial details and performance of a proposed development. The tool will essentially estimate how much the developer's performance is being impacted by offering affordable housing relative to the amount of subsidy that's being requested. The tool will also allow the region to assess if the financial inputs provided by the applicant are reasonable.
Can I make sure, I'm sorry to interrupt, Nick, can I just make sure that everybody is aware that they should be muted? Thank you. Please carry on.
No problem. Thank you. And once regional staff have evaluated applications for eligibility and against the list of preferred criteria, a committee of regional and local municipal staff will review all applications and scoring and make recommendations. And to that end, staff are seeking delegated authority to approve applications with annual reporting to regional council. So with that, I'm going to hand things back over to Nahida to run through the remainder of the presentation.
Great, thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? In addition to having local municipal staff participate throughout the process, we recognize the importance of hearing from the development community, both private and nonprofit. We held 2 stakeholder consultation sessions in September 2019 and in May of this year. The second consultation was held virtually and included over 50 participants. A stakeholder questionnaire, a feedback was also received, and the program design that you are hearing about today incorporated feedback and suggestions. We heard general support and interest in the program, and we anticipate further conversation with the development industry as we move forward with implementation. Next slide, please. Another important consideration for the pilot program is the amount of funding available to implement the program. We currently have $2.5 million committed through the 2019 regional budget process. However, the analysis has demonstrated that this amount may not encourage significant participation in the program, and this may make it challenging to test the pilot program. Also, given that the program is designed as a competitive process, the number of projects we will be able to fund will be limited by the budget. It is not guaranteed that all projects that apply will receive funding, even if they meet the criteria. As discussed in the associated staff report, we are looking at a future budget ask of an additional $5 million to be sourced from working fund reserves. This will be explored further through the 2021 budget, pending further understanding of the impacts of COVID-19 on regional resources. This additional budget would enable us to test the program in a more comprehensive manner and draw more robust conclusions prior to adjusting the program. In addition, today's council agenda also includes the proposed DC deferral interest rate policy for nonprofit and rental housing. We see this policy as complementing the proposed affordable housing pilot program funding, as housing developed as part of the pilot program will be subject to the final interest rate policy. In addition, the pilot program has been set up in such a way that it allows other funding opportunities, such as through senior levels of government, to be stacked or layered alongside regional funding. We will also continue working with our local municipalities to identify additional funding and incentives. Next slide, please. In terms of the vehicle to implement the pilot program, as Nick touched on, we are bringing forward a new municipal housing facilities bylaw and replacing the existing 2003 bylaw. The bylaw is to be considered as part of today's council agenda. The municipal housing facilities bylaw will enable us to enter into agreements with successful applicants to secure affordable housing units. A municipal housing facility bylaw is enabled under the Municipal Act, and we are recommending the use of this tool based on the best practices review prepared by Enberry Line Consultants and staff. The Municipal Housing Facilities Bylaw enables the region to update the program without a formal amendment to the bylaw, allowing for administrative flexibility and implementation to make program changes. There is also no appeal to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal for a municipal housing facility bylaw. This tool also enables local municipal participation in the pilot program through the region's bylaw. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, regional staff will be looking forward to implementation, including formalizing the evaluation framework for assessing program outcomes and successes, developing program materials such as application materials, public-facing documents, communication materials, addressing staff needs in the Housing Development Office through implementation, and establishing an administrative process. As noted, the viability of the program over the short and medium term will be impacted by the additional incentives that can be secured. We look forward to working on this initiative with our local municipalities and implementing the program, working collaboratively towards our shared housing objectives. Next slide. Thank you. That's the end of our presentation, and we're open to any questions.
Nahida, Nick, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. And I do have questions. Santos, Dasco, Fonseca, Paleshi. Councillor Santos.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to see that the environmental and sustainability piece is in there in terms of the development as part of the pilot. But I do have a couple of questions. Number one, we're creating incentives for affordable housing. How are we going to ensure that it's quality development, that it's quality housing despite the affordability aspect? Affordable housing sometimes has a bad reputation in terms of being lower quality. So it'd be great to get some comments to better understand how, despite these incentives, how we're going to make sure it's quality development. And then my other question is, I'm happy to see that there's been stakeholder engagement with the developers on this. And the criteria around being next to transit, urban hubs, being accessible, et cetera. But what becomes problematic is during public consultations, the NIMBYs come out and they tell the councillors that they don't want it in their neighborhood. They don't want the density, they don't want the affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. So how is it that through this pilot program, we can better engage local communities to give them a better understanding that building affordable housing actually is great because it helps us deal with the issue of illegal secondary units, basement apartments, and the market finding other ways to build less safe, less sustainable housing options. So those are just my two questions. Would love to get your comments.
Nahida?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the features and the construction material, through the process, we are developing a kind of a criteria-based process. And through that, the submission, we would request details around pro forma. We would request details around potentially the construction materials used, and we would want to make sure that we're satisfied with the product that the applicant is coming forward with. That would be reviewed in a rigorous way through a committee structure and through that criteria-based scoring that Nick referred to. So we would look to ensure that we are quite satisfied with the product that is coming to the market, and would want to hold those values that are dear to the region around affordable housing that fits in with the neighborhood and that is of a high quality material. So I hope that answers your first question, Councillor Santos. In terms of the second question around making sure that the community is, buying into the affordable housing and the value of affordable housing versus other, ill-conceived notions of affordable housing, we do intend through the upcoming months to develop communication materials that do speak to the program itself so that we can get development industry involved. But that communication material will also allow for those messaging to the community that helps to reinforce the importance of looking at our community through the overall housing continuum and the importance of helping the community acquire affordable housing that meets the needs. So we would look to working through our communications staff, but also working with counselors. And I know that there are newsletters and other stories that we might be able to help with putting some of that messaging across.
Thank you. And I think perhaps maybe it should be even that communication and education for the various communities should be even more targeted. Like I would imagine that many of these projects that are going to be piloted through this will be in infill sites, areas near like downtown Brampton, areas where there might be existing neighborhoods, existing residential development, where, they buy into the concept of more affordable housing as long as it's not in their backyard. And, we're all counselors, we hear it all the time where we do hear residents, even though it's a great project, we hear residents say to us and put the pressure on us as counselors that it's going to create more traffic, more garbage, more parking is going to be an issue, and we don't want, those type of people here in our neighborhood. So I think like the more we can proactively educate in those targeted areas where we want this pilot project to potentially be, even before, development applications come through, I think we need to do that, because what will end up happening otherwise is we will be placed with the pressure from the residents where the affordable housing project is going to be. And sometimes the pressure is really hard to deal with, and then the application gets voted down. So I just want to reemphasize that if there's a way for us to more proactively engage communities in those targeted areas where we actually want some of this affordable housing to take place, I think that would be very smart of us to do. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you. I see Commissioner, thank you. I see Commissioner Sheehy's come on the list. Perhaps you'd like to add something at this point. Janice?
Thank you. And through the chair, I absolutely appreciate the comments that have been made. I did want to emphasize, though, that these particular pilot projects are geared towards more middle income units. So we may not see the degree of opposition that we tend to see when we are building units focused on very low income levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dasco.
Thank you through the chair. And I just wanted to say, I find looking outside of the normal course of business and trying to expand into newer territory, always, it's interesting. I'd like to see the pilot projects one, I guess, a few concerns I do have, I wanted to be known is sometimes when people talk about the affordable component, they come with a 1-bedroom type of scenario. So seeing something that is actually going to accommodate families is important. And the other component too that I find quite often has been not been part of the equation, which I think very much needs to be, is the seniors component. And I know we've had some of these conversations already with regards to affordability. For example, the other that I would look at here too is if we're looking at a pilot in terms of trying to do something a little bit different. I do think that what Councillor Santos mentioned in terms of NIMBYism is one thing, but also having it fit into a community, because I think for most of Mississauga and I think a good chunk of Brampton, a lot of it's been built out. Ward 1 in Mississauga has been definitely built out. We're into brownfield remediation and things of that nature now to do some building. But these are stable existing communities by and large. And I just think as part of this, what should be baked into these plans is to be extensively communicating with the community to have a collaborative approach, and also that the built form is going to fit into those communities that they're planning to go into. So I'm hoping that this is going to be part of what we're going to have going forward, part of this pilot project.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize. I'm experiencing some delay, and that's why my video has been off. Apologize if you can't see my face, but I am here. So thank you very much for the presentation and the report. It's very reassuring. I just had a couple of comments that sort of piggyback onto both what Councillor Santos and Councillor Dasco had to say. First off, I did have a question around, and I'm glad to see that it was explained in the presentation, the reference to the 2.5 million and the potential to increase that and work from reserves in working with the various, in particular, not-for-profits that currently have housing within my ward that are looking to expand specifically purpose-built rental housing, and working with them to expand on their properties within the community, to Councillor Dasco's point about fitting in within the community, to expand their portfolio of purpose-built rental. The incentives for them are this type of incentive, that 2.5 million. Once you're getting through the first stages of just pre-design or working through other incentive levels of government funding, whether it be federal or provincial, all of the reserve funds that they have in place have been used up. So it's good to see that within the report, we're looking at potentially moving forward to expand this portfolio, like the portfolio of funding potentially, because what I do hear from those that their goal is to solely build this purpose-built rental, and they've recognized, and all along they have a good history of providing purpose-built rental, that this incentive amount is it's very costly to, as we all know, to build purpose-built rental. So I'm glad to see that we're looking at that. I want to echo that I've heard from the not-for-profits, again, in particular not-for-profits, that currently their sole focus is to build purpose-built rental. And again, many of these provide a range, so it's a mix of rent geared to income, supportive housing along with market rent. I have heard from them that this stacking of provincial, federal, municipal, regional funding incentives works to their advantage and will be very helpful for them because, as we all know and we've experienced in the past, if there's one program that the federal government has put out, but then it provides and different groups apply for that funding, whether they be private developers, not-for-profit, and or not-for-profit, what happens is in applying for those incentives federally, they come across barriers provincially or regionally or municipally. So it's good to see that this pilot will promote and work towards the stacking of the incentives. Also, what's emphasized in the report around looking at waiver of deferral of the DC or deferral or waiver of DCs. I think this is extremely important. Many of the federal and provincial incentives around affordable housing and middle income housing and purpose-built rental housing has built right into it. For example, through the CMHC current program that's put in place by the federal government has built right in that recognition by a municipality or a region around either waiving of building fees or waiving of preliminary environmental assessment or waiver or deferral of DCs is a precondition. So it's good to see that that is there. And to Councillor Santos' point with regards to sustainability and affordability in the longer run, I encourage the region. It's good to see that it is here in the pilot, but there are a number of incentives, again, through the federal and the provincial government that I hope that the region will continue to have conversation with the development industry and also not-for-profits that if the groups applying can be credited for in terms of the type of quality infrastructure they're building, and if they can show through their project that that this will mean, through the sustainable build of the project, it will mean affordability in the long run, that we need to recognize and celebrate those projects and make sure in terms of best practices that is built in. I'll give an example. I'm working with a group right now that's looking to build senior rental, purpose-built rental, a mix of market rent, market affordability, and rent geared to income. And they have built right into their application a passive house. A passive house building ensures in the long run that there's almost zero electricity costs and zero heating and zero cooling costs to the tenants that are within the building, but also for the overall heating, cooling of the common areas. So I think that's extremely important and echo what Councillor Santos has said in terms of the quality of the build. I do have just one final question, and this goes to what Councillor Dasco was saying around seniors housing. I do think, and I recognize obviously that we need to be building when it comes to middle income for 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom for seniors, or sorry, not for seniors, for families. However, I do think there's merit in continuing a conversation with the developers and not-for-profits around including some one-bedroom purpose-built rental units in there. And again, I go back to the seniors. There are, in terms of purpose-built rental, I do believe there is a need for that being built into the mix so that seniors can stay within their communities continue to thrive within their communities in a purpose-built rental environment. And also recognizing, and you have within the report, accessibility and recognizing those with disabilities. I've heard from some families that are supporting adults with physical and mental disabilities, that they have a very challenging time trying to access purpose-built rental for their adult children with physical and mental disabilities with regards to one-bedroom units. So those are all my comments, and I do want to say thank you very much. I think this is taking a great step forward when it comes to recognizing the need for purpose-built rental in the middle-income residents within our region. Thank you.
Thank you. That's my list. Madam Clerk, over to you for the vote.
Thank you. We have a motion moved by Councillor Dasco, seconded by Councillor Santos, that the Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program, as set out in the joint report of the Interim Commissioner of Public Works and the Commissioner of Human Services, titled Region of Peel Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program, be endorsed. And further, that Municipal Housing Facility Bylaw 41-2003 be repealed. And further, that a new municipal housing facility bylaw be presented for enactment in accordance with Section 110 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, and shall be effective on the date of enactment. And further, that the Commissioner of Human Services and the Director Housing Development Office be authorized to approve and execute funding agreements, together with such further ancillary documents necessary for the pilot program, on financial terms satisfactory to the Chief Financial Officer and on legal terms satisfactory to the Regional Solicitor. And we'll take the vote. Mayor Brown. Mayor Brown.
Yes, can you hear me?
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Councillor Demurla?
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon? Councillor Dillon? Councillor Downey?
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini?
Favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves?
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes?
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney?
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden?
In favor.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Raz?
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sado?
Yes.
Councillor Sado in favor. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair?
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr?
Yes.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson?
Favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Councillor Dillon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can hear you
We were
now.
having issues before. I voted yes. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Councillor Dinner.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next staff presentation, 10.2, Progress Update on Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and also deals with Report 22.1. Here for information, presentation by Brian Laundrie, Director of Strategic Planning and Performance. Brian, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Nika and Council, and on behalf of the entire Community Safety and Wellbeing Planning Team, thank you for inviting us to provide an update on the status of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. I will briefly overview the impetus and background of the plan development, highlights some important process considerations in development of the plan, summarize key components under consideration within each of the 3 areas of focus, including implementation activities and the roles of the region, and outline how the recent high-profile issues related to community safety and well-being have been considered within the plan and in our conversations, and how related activities within the community can align to the community safety and well-being framework. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the region is legislated under the Police Services Act 1990 to prepare and adopt a community safety and well-being plan. The requirements for the development and review of the plan are described specifically within the legislation. Here in Peel, a system leadership table was established as an advisory steering committee and includes community representation from health, community and social services, education, and policing. Interim CAO Nancy Polsinelli and Chief Peel Regional Police Chief Nish Daraipa have co-chaired this table since late last fall. I would like to highlight that although the impetus for the plan was driven by the legislation, the plan and the benefits of the plan for the community go well beyond the legal requirement. Next slide, please. In terms of milestones, to date, the system leadership table is formed. We've approved a governance structure and also recommended an extended leadership table to provide a broader set of perspectives from the community representatives, content experts, and elected officials. Council has approved temporary staffing to support creation of the plan and appointed Chair Anika and Councillors Downey, Paleshi, and Sato to the extended leadership table. Substantial amount of research, data analysis, and local input led to the identification of our 3 focus areas, and just wanted to highlight some of that work that led up to the inputs into the plan. There's a very extensive jurisdictional review of all existing plans in Ontario and beyond. There's a detailed analysis of the crime severity index and crime trends in Peel, as well as other related health-related databases. There was mining and research of the comprehensive health status report prepared by Peel Public Health. There was an analysis of existing strategies and key initiatives within Peel, which were mapped against the community safety wellbeing framework so we could identify any gaps and opportunities. And then we held facilitated sessions with the extended leadership table. So in the fall, we launched into our action table meetings, which were progressing very nicely when COVID hit, which paused and reoriented our work in terms of the process, but it didn't stop it. The community engagement was adjusted from an in-person to a digital approach and was delayed slightly, but conducted in May and June. And over the summer months, we will be completing drafting of the plan and we'll bring it to council in late fall. As a final point, there continues to be an active regional internal working group that contributes insight and ensures that the approach for the planning leverages internal supports and aligns program activities. Next slide, please. Given the concepts of well-being and safety are so broad, multidimensional, and complex, the system leadership table spent considerable time developing our vision and mission and identifying the 3 initial areas of focus. What was landed on aligns perfectly with the region's vision of community for life and further supports the concept of working with the community and each other. With respect to our working definition of community safety and well-being, we simply adopted the Solicitor General's definition. And we did that, and you can see it on the slide, because it emphasizes that community safety and well-being is more than just having our basic needs met and being free from crime, but rather it encompasses all of the social determinants of health. Next slide, please. This slide provides a snapshot of the elements of the plan. So it lists the initial 3 areas of focus. It outlines that the plan and the implementation of it will cover a 4-year time horizon. It identifies that youth will be a special consideration throughout the plan and that the priorities will be reviewed at least annually. And it describes the enablers that will ensure the sustainability and success of the plan. These enablers are things the region is ideally suited to bring to the table in support of the plan, the partners, and our community. With respect to communication engagement, the plan proposes continued ongoing community and stakeholder engagement. With respect to data, the data monitoring and evaluation action table is developing a community safety and well-being indicator framework consisting of a set of population level indicators organized into domains and subdomains under the broad concepts related to community safety and well-being, such as health, safety, living standards, education, etc. And finally, advocating for funding increases for community services across Peel will be a major focus. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the 3 areas of focus on the left-hand column, and across the top shows that for each of those, the goals and strategies have been identified, outcomes are drafted and being refined, indicators have been sourced but are still a little bit in development. And then the last column shows that within these 3 areas of focus, there have been emerging opportunities. And I'd like to speak to those next. Next slide, please. So moving into the areas of focus, if you'll allow me, rather than focusing on the draft goals, which are described in more detail in the report, we'll move over and talk about some of the emerging opportunities. So under family violence, and as an early implementation activity, the Family Violence Action Table has taken on the coordination of the Council resolution passed in February to develop a public education and awareness campaign to highlight the issue of domestic violence. Since that time, an advisory committee and working group have been struck and are meeting with the goal of launching a broad-based campaign in November. The draft primary objective is to raise visibility, awareness, and educate Peel residents on domestic violence to support the identification and reduction of cases in our community. The second opportunity listed there has been a joint effort through Peel's Community Response Table and the Family Violence Action Table to support women and families who may be experiencing abuse or are at increased risk of abuse during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Emerging opportunities for the mental health and addiction sectors have included the activity to support the June Council resolutions. First, to advocate for an equitable funding formula and to address the historical funding shortfalls in Peel. Second, to develop an awareness campaign that illustrates local experiences of inadequate access. And third opportunity that has emerged is the ongoing discussion related to the recent deaths involving police and individuals in mental health crisis, with the perspective of looking at upstream approaches to provide the support people need before they evolve into a crisis. Next slide, please. One of the emerging opportunities within the Systemic Discrimination Action Table relates to the Council resolution last month to support policies and programs that address the inequities that the Black and other marginalized groups continue to experience in Peel. At the last Systemic Discrimination Action Table meeting, much of the discussion focused on how to best balance and align strategies that respond to the pressing need in front of us in the motion, while respecting the fundamental need of the system to build a sustainable response within this area. Next slide, please. So the roles can be multivariate, and in fact, all partners wear several hats that sit at the multiple community safety and wellbeing tables. As a secretariat, the region provides all important backbone support in the areas of coordination, facilitation, advocacy and communication, and data analysis and support. But the region's also a partner, and it participates like any other partner. Sometimes as a lead where it makes sense, sometimes as an equal partner and participant, and other times as a support, depending on the circumstance. And it's important to understand those different roles. Partners, they're champions, they're advocates, they're planners, service providers, funders, and together we are all working to align our activities to meet shared goals. Next slide, please. So just in terms of the current status, the action tables, the system leadership table, the extended leadership table, we're all working to refine, prioritize, prioritize for year one. Our community engagement results are being reviewed and incorporated into the plan. And we've determined that engagement with the community will be ongoing throughout the 4-year period. The indicator framework is developing under the leadership of the Data Monitoring and Evaluation Action Table. And the draft plan will be input and reviewed throughout the summer by the leadership tables. And the final plan will be shared with Council with the target of late October. Meanwhile, we'll continue to be responsive to the emerging needs in the community. Next slide, please. These are just some risk considerations to wrap up with from different perspectives. So from a global perspective, underfunding undermines the ability of the community to improve systems, and we've talked a lot at Council about that. From a community perspective, there's no identified funding source for ongoing communication, education, community engagement, and implementation. From the partner perspective, they're taking on a lot of demands to not only run their own business and agencies, but they're trying to support planning and implementation, even of ongoing things already, such as the Domestic Violence Awareness Campaign as it develops. And from the region's perspective, we've got turnover of contracted staff and resulting vacancies that have been managed so far, but remain a concern with these types of positions. And without continuing regional support as the backbone organization, partner involvement, I think is going to be difficult, if not impossible, to maintain. And just in conclusion, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan presents a timely and I would say fortunate opportunity for the region and community partners to continue our work together to address system gaps and design a sustainable and coordinated approach to achieving a thriving community for life. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. And I have quite a list. Demerla, Santos, Sato, Downey, Dasco, Fonseca. Councillor Demerla.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just want to begin by thanking Brian for the report, and just wanted to say one thing that I'm very glad is the decision to continue to bring the report forward in January 2021 and not delaying it due to COVID, even though we had that opportunity. I want to say it's a great report, and I look forward to, I guess, January 2021. And I also want to acknowledge that, you know, there's many topical tables at the Region of Peel, but this perhaps is one of the most, given what's going on and public sentiment. So I'm really pleased that we have this table. I understand it's a legislative requirement, but I quite like the way the work has been structured, and I'm bringing forward a motion today that I think will be a companion piece to what this table is trying to accomplish. So I look forward to working, and Chair, I'm happy to move this when the time is appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Santos. Councillor Santos, I see you and your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
I'm
Try
sorry.
again. There we go.
I will start over again. I apologize. I was double muted. Again, I share the sentiments that Councillor Demerla has expressed. I just have a couple of questions. The first one is if we're still on the ideal timeline of launching that public awareness campaign regarding domestic violence. I think I suggested we target November, December of this year around the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and just before Christmas. And then my second question is I am very much supportive of what we're doing on the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, especially given Councillor Downey's motion at previous council calling for a crisis when it comes to anti-Black racism here in the region. But I do think that the work we're doing here with this plan, it plays a significant role in us addressing those issues on top of mental health issues as well. How are we doing the outreach so that the residents in the region of Peel know about this and know about the work that we are doing? Do we have a social media campaign? Do we have videos? Do we have information that's going out there to let the residents know that indeed, although we have to do a lot more work, this is an example of some of the work that we've already been doing and you need to know about this? So those are just my 2 questions.
Through the chair, and thank you, Councillor Santos, for your questions. And yes, we're on target for the November launch of the domestic violence awareness campaign. That was delayed and might adjust a little bit what we had planned to do, but we're still targeting the November launch. On the second question, we've had the conversations at our systemic discrimination table about what the anti-Black racism work we could do related to the motion and related to the social impacts. The table's trying to balance, the need to complete the work for this community safe wellbeing plan with what response we could provide to support the emerging need. So with respect to that, we're working with the Culture and Inclusion Office and our partners around the table to try to determine the next steps on that. And in terms of letting the community know the work we're doing, we're kind of working in parallel processes here because we still don't have a completely endorsed plan. We're working on it, and the partners are working on it. So we're working at this time through our partnerships to try to establish the alignments and the linkages in terms of what we want to do with anti-Black racism, et cetera, in the short term. We can't get out ahead of the endorsement of the plan by the leadership table or the council too far. So we're balancing those 2 things in parallel at the same time.
Thank you. And I would suggest that even if we can have some social media tiles or something so that counselors can just at the bare minimum even share that there is such thing as a community safety well-being plan in place. Like even as simple as that, I would be very keen and eager to share that on all my social media to let everyone know and point them to a website or a place where they could find out more on the community safety well-being plan.
Okay, through the chair, thank you for that feedback, and I'll take that too. We have communications staff dedicated to the plan. Obviously, it's a very complicated topic, and they've got a thing called COVID on their mind, but they're still working with us, and we'll work with our communications to make that happen.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation and for all the work you've done on steering us through the plan. I spoke to it 2 weeks ago when the chief was here speaking on policing, particularly as it related to some of the mental health issues and the systemic discrimination. And my comments then, I'm going to repeat it now, is that I've been around the region for a long time, and I've been involved in many consultation processes, a lot of planning on, issues of youth violence, discrimination, mental health. I mean, we've done many of those over the years, but I have to say that this is by far the most comprehensive review and consultation process and planning that I believe that the region has ever done. It has consolidated a lot more of the data research, the consultation, the working with the various organizations that provide the services, and really taking a look at what we do at the region, what services we provide, and what others provide and should be and can be providing, and what supports they might need from us. We've had consultation, we've had plans with the police before on these issues, but I think, when the province announced that we had to do a plan, I guess I was a little skeptical because a lot of the provincial mandates for plans are really just busy work. Make a plan, file it with us, and then that's it. There was really no meat to the provincial requirement. And I'm really proud of the council that that said, no, we're going to make this a plan. We're going to take this opportunity and we're going to develop a plan that will have implementation as part of it, and that will meet the needs of our region, of our citizens, and focus on those key areas. You know, I recall the very first sessions that we held. There were so many issues that we wanted to deal with, or I should say that we could deal with. And focusing in on those three key areas, the facilitation process was absolutely phenomenal. And the work that we've done at the sessions, and with councillors Downey, Paleshi, and the chair, you know, I'm sure they would agree with me that the involvement was very inspirational. And everyone that has been part of this has been extremely dedicated to it. So I really, I'm very pleased with where we are now, and I'm looking forward to, I guess we have a meeting next week again. And when we bring the report forward in October, I'm hoping that council will endorse it. And I think also we need to take a look at how we can use this plan as leverage with the MPPs in the region of Peel. You know, once I know we can't give them a lot of information prior to council endorsing the report, but I think they need to know what we're doing and where we're heading. You know, maybe, I'm not sure, my screen just shut down on my on my iPad on my agenda, but I'm not sure if the report mentions sending the report to the MPPs just to bring them up to date. But I think it would be a good thing so that they can be prepared when we finalize the report in October, and hopefully endorse it then. That because there's going to be a lot of asks of the province as we go forward with this plan. But again, I want to thank everyone who has been part of it. It's been a phenomenal plan, and it's actually been a real pleasure working with all of you and the organizations. And my one concern was your second last slide, where you spoke about the continuity of staffing. And maybe we can talk about that further, because that is an important thing. Because sometimes when you have people who are leading these leaving, it's hard for someone else to pick it up. So Nancy, I'm looking at you on this one, and maybe you can advise us at some point if there will be staff leaving, contract staff, if there's a succession plan or an extension of contracts in mind. I think it would be very helpful. Maybe you could raise it next week at the meeting when we're on, if you have an answer to fill us in. But thank you again. And I was going to move receipt of the presentation. Councillor DeMerla already did, so I'll second the receipt motion.
Thank you. Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. I couldn't agree more with my colleagues, and I think.
Sorry, could you speak louder? I personally can't hear you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with my colleagues. I think that the engagement has been fantastic. I agree with Councillor Santos that we could probably put some more attention to letting the community know what we're doing. I think that all of us have heard multiple outcries from different community groups through the last few months. COVID has definitely magnified a number of issues within our communities. And I think that it's important the community knows this is work that we are doing. You know, from every lens and all angles, this work is actually happening. And, you know, we're getting a lot of outcries for mental health supports for our police, connectivity through the school boards, all of these things, when it's applied to the community in its entirety, are conversations that are happening at this table and have been happening at this table. It's really just a matter of maybe doing a little bit of region team building and letting the community know that we are doing this, and it is a priority for us. That then also transfers over into the staffing commitment, we need to make sure that our commitment or our actions reflect our commitment. So I would echo Councillor Sato's comments regarding that staff position, because ultimately, as the lead, we need to have continuity there. A lot of this work is based on relationship building with community agencies and community stakeholders, like our school boards and our police partners. So I think that those are really important points at all across the board. I'm concerned about that staffing piece, and I think that we need to, as we move forward with the report. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't have said it better myself, Councillor Sato, Councillor Downey. It's so exciting to be a part of this and seeing this evolve with so many people that are at the table providing their inputs. It really is a great discussion all around. I did have the same concern over the turnover of contracted staff, not just with the region, but the partners as well. So if we can, try and reach out and get a handle on something to the effect that, is I know they all really want to be there, and I think everybody is so excited to take part in this, but we do want to look at this, because this isn't something that's ever going to be put on a shelf. Councillor Sato, I know that you support the fact that this is going to be something that determines on how we do a lot of our business at the region, at the municipalities, on a go-forward basis. And this is going to be the constant working document that evolves and changes and just gets better with time. On the funding piece, Brian, I'm a little bit at a loss on what we can do to try and get the funding that we need for. I don't want to compromise any of the innovation or the ability to improve systems. So I want to know what we can do, who we can reach to, and if you need that from me, I can tell you, but I would like to hear from you. And your hair looks lovely, by the way.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi, and through the chair, you really appreciated my long beard that came off 2 weeks ago. But the funding's a difficult one. We've talked about that in terms of the implementation of the plan through council discussions two council meetings ago, where we had long discussions about mental health and addictions and the lack of supports in Peel region, the need for to fill historical inequities in funding and gaps, and to put in place equitable funding formulas. So certainly the province, I think, is one of the places that we have to just build the capacity within our community providers. So they are not only being asked to support system redesign, integration, coordination, work better together, come to tables like community safety and well-being, and we have 80 different individuals representing 30 organizations sitting at our planning tables, and yet they have to go back and provide services that they can't meet the need for under the current funding. So certainly just bringing up the overall capacity of the community sector is an important place, and that lies primarily with the province, I would suggest, as an opportunity. With regards to the Secretariat and the supports that the region can put in place, to be honest about it, we hear a lot that we need the region to lead this. We've heard it through a community response table. We hear it through Ontario health teams in some instances. We hear it through the community safety and well-being, that if the region can't put its resources towards supporting us to be able to come together, to coordinate us, to help us with our data analysis, to advocate on our behalf, and to do the heavy lifting that a backbone organization does under a collective impact model, we're going to be in trouble. So the community, I think, would support leadership in this area. And I think any resource spent in this direction is a resource that will be saved somewhere else, where other tables will spontaneously emerge to try to cover the gaps that need to be filled with these emerging opportunities. So those are a couple of thoughts on the funding.
Thank you, Brian. And, you know, I, when come budget time, I'll be the first one to raise my hand in support of, you know, some full-time staff with this, with what we're achieving here, because this is not something that this is going to be with us. This is going to be a major part. And like I said, so I won't repeat myself, but I look forward to further having those discussions around funding and what we can do as a council, and what we can also do as municipalities, and reaching out to, you know, potential private sector, or like Cato said, Councillor Sato said, reaching out to our members of parliament, provincially and federally. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michael. If I may, now that everybody's spoken, dare I say, and I know it's getting long in the day already, but dare I say that in the 16, 17 months I've had the privilege of having this job in this chair, I think I'm going to tell you the most exciting thing that I've told you in the 2 years that I've been around on this file, which I think is the most significant file that we are dealing with. It's exciting to note, and I hope it's comforting to our constituents, because I've said this to a couple recently for the calls that have made it to my desk, that the issues of our day, talking about policing, CAMH issues, equity, Black Lives Matter, all of that, are all encompassed in this entity that we've been working on since 18 months ago. And that's the fundamental point I make to people. It's not like we're waking up today and say we have some challenges, we have some issues, there's stuff that needs to be done. We recognized that at the beginning of this council, and when the concept came forward, the community safety and well-being plans. I sought out Minister Tabolo along with my colleagues at AMO last year, and that started a conversation. His first conversation and mine were 32 years ago when I first met the minister. And then Councillor Downey and Councillor Innes and I met with the minister. Nancy gave a great presentation from which there was a follow-up round table that we co-hosted with the minister here, where he sat in my chair and I sat beside him, to discuss these issues. He's been doing a lot of work. As you probably know, the minister has a huge soft spot in his heart. Can you imagine somebody that was trained as a lawyer, and I met him 32 years ago in philanthropy when we worked on a housing project together, then got elected to public office, and in his spare time got his doctoral degree in public well-being and health, and dealing with the challenges that folks have, and addiction and things, in his spare time. And now he's our minister and well known to our community. You recall it was 2 council meetings ago we had this conversation. I said, let me reach out to the minister again, and I did. And it was last week that the minister invited me at a roundtable discussion with our 30-odd service providers here in Peel. And I was happy to attend, and I want to give Deepak Anand also credit for having hosted the meeting as well and for inviting me. And to my surprise, when it started, I thought I'd just be listening in. They said, wouldn't it be great if the regional chair kicked us off? And I had no prepared notes, but I'm never at a loss for words. And I thought the obvious refrain you're going to get from the chair of the region of Peel is all about Peel Fair Share. So I said, so we appreciate what you're doing. I thank them for their involvement. You know, we've been beat up over this for decades now, and we have great ideas, but without the funding, without your help, well, to their credit, almost on cue, had we scripted it, it would not have worked out this well. Every agency that spoke after me, Children's Aid Society, Catholics, and there were 17. It's as though I'd queued up their comment. Yes, the chair's got it right. In fact, here's the data. Here's the number. Here's the data. Here's how far we are behind Toronto. And why do we get $1 where they get? But they had the actual hard data. What was to be a 45-minute conversation became 2 hours. The minister did not leave to go to his next meeting. And when we'd all finished speaking, the minister said, wow, I knew it was bad. I did not know it was this bad. Which prompted a follow-up conversation that he and I had afterwards. And the minister has advised me, because he genuinely cares, and I think he genuinely cares about Peel, and everybody in Peel's been making the argument for so long, and he's listening, that based on this initiative that we are talking about now, and based upon what's going on in the province and how we're on the right track, that his budget of about $4.1 billion is going to see a $4 billion increase over the next 10 years. And he's looking for the right model or conduit to bring these community services to all communities in Ontario going forward. And he may have found it in us. And so I reached out to the chief of police. I reached out to Nancy as the co-chairs, and I said, we have a tremendous opportunity here. And I want to be clear, it's double-sided. Number one is he realizes himself, as do I, as many, all these agencies that we have across the province. Remember, started with the LHINs and et cetera, and I'm not picking on any health networks, et cetera. He's saying a lot of silos, we need to get them all to work together better, all of which makes sense. And then he goes down, and we have to find the right model going forward, how we deal with policing, how we deal with addiction, et cetera, and thinks we may be on the right track here in Peel. So, Michael, in answer to your question, I've been told there is more funding coming for all of the province, and we may sit well high up on the list because, and I want to be clear, because of the work we're doing in a report like this and building the model that'll serve Peel and Ontario for the next 50 years. So stay tuned. This is for real, and we might finally break through. And I'm very, very optimistic with sincere gratitude to the minister that he's listening. And all this work, I believe, will be handsomely rewarded in the months and years to come. With thanks to Councillor Downey, Peleshi, Sato for all the work you've done on the committee. I just sit on the side, but my real chair is Nancy and the chief. And the new chief has been vital in all of this. Nish gets it. I think that's why we got the person that we got to be the new chief, and I think that helps. So we're all singing from the same hymn book here. So these are exciting times. Let's keep doing this very good work to finalize this marvelous model that we're creating, because I think we will be handsomely rewarded going forward. Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I apologize for coming back on the list. I don't like to follow you. Because you really rounded everything out quite nicely. I guess one point that I had forgotten to mention earlier, and I think that you really touched on it, is that this work embodies the idea of working upstream. And when Brian talked about all the agencies around the table and the difficulties that some of them have working through this work because of their own shortfalls in funding and staffing, oftentimes you have staff members work outside of their desks to complete their portions of this work. It becomes difficult for them because they are wrestling.
And Joanna, sorry to interrupt. Hard to hear you a little bit again. If you can try a little better. Thank you.
Absolutely. I apologize. Really, what I wanted to say was that this work embodies the idea of working upstream within our communities. And oftentimes those agencies that sit around the table that have difficulties keeping up with it because of their own funding shortfalls, their own staffing shortfalls, it is so critical that we support them because, in that cyclical idea of the upstream work, if we are able to support them here and now with this work, ultimately the idea is the utopian society where those services aren't needed. Wouldn't it be a great place to live if we didn't have to have a service, that helped women dealing with domestic violence, because that was a thing of the past. So ultimately, I think that the support of our community agencies at this moment and at this point in time is so very critical. And I thank you, Chair, for your advocacy of that funding through Minister Tabola's ministry and the provincial government. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all my speakers. Madam Clerk, how do we proceed?
Thank you. So there's a motion of receipt for the presentation and report 10.2 from Councillor Demerla, seconded by Councillor Sato. Are there any objections? Seeing none, it carries. And we're bringing forward item 22.1, Councillor Demerla's motion, seconded by Councillor Downey. It was circulated. It is lengthy, so I'll give it a short reading. Therefore, be it resolved that the Region of Peel commits, through collaboration and in the spirit of mutual respect between all involved agencies, including Peel Regional Police, Community Safety and Mental Health Agencies, and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Tables, to report back to Regional Council with a plan to increase the number of MCRRT units in Peel and improvements to the delivery model, including making mental health workers the lead, or at the very least, an equal partner during a joint police and mental health response to a mental health crisis situation when appropriate, and further, that the Region Appeal advocate to the provincial government for changes to the Mental Health Act that would allow for mental health services to have authority to intervene and act as leaders in mental health crisis situations when appropriate, and further, that the Region Appeal advocate to the provincial government for the redeploying of resources saved from reducing reliance on policing to address mental health to MCRRT and other crisis supports, or support new resourcing and funding for MCRRT units alongside other crisis measures. We'll take the vote.
Councillor Councillor Santos, I see you on my list. Did you have a question regarding the motion?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Not necessarily a question. I do fully support the motion. I just wanted to make a comment because I think this is an important step for us. I think that our chief, our Peel Regional Police, the police board, this council, we have been very much so, although we have a lot of work to do, more proactive on addressing some of these things than the public knows. However, in support of this motion, I also think that it's important for us to be very transparent on what some of those barriers are to causing this change, whether that's an organization or who or what or where is in the way of making some of these changes happen. We should be very transparent, because I don't think it's necessarily the police board. I don't think it's necessarily our chief. I think that there are other things in the way that I think we need to be very transparent and acknowledge and let the public know what those barriers are in some of the changes that we're trying to make. I do support the motion, and thank you for Councillor Demirla and Councillor Downey for bringing it forward.
Thank you. We'll call the vote. Mayor Brown.
Chair, I just wanted to make some comments, if that's okay.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all those who helped draft the motion, in particular Commissioner Granger, Clerk Lockyer, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and I also want to thank Chief Nish for his support, and of course Councillor Downey for seconding it. And I couldn't agree more with what the previous speaker said in terms of, and that's what this motion really tries to do, is also address some of those structural issues and barriers that continue to make mental health, especially in crisis situations, a policing issue, which is the Mental Health Act itself. In that act, police is the only agency that has the power to do involuntary apprehending involuntarily a mental health person to move them to another place. And that's what consistently makes police the lead. So we keep coming up with reform to try and, for lack of a better word, de-police mental health issues, but we keep ending up with the police in the lead, not because they want to, because in fairness to them, they're the first ones to say we don't want mental health to be policing, but it's the legislation and of course some of this perhaps just cultural habit of having the police be a first responder. So this motion really, and if passed, is going to put Peel in the forefront of actually making that change that seeks to structurally change the police from being the de facto first responder to empowering the mental health community and the mental health worker to be that first responder. And so I think this is a really significant change that we are going after, and I'm really pleased we have this opportunity, and I look forward to everybody's support. And once again, I want to thank everyone who was involved in crafting this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, the vote.
Thank you. Take the vote. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
Yes, in favor.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demirla.
Absolutely, yes.
Councillor Demirla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon.
In favor?
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Fonseca in favor. Counselor Fortini.
In favor?
Counselor Fortini in favor. Counselor Groves.
In favor.
Counselor Groves in favor. Counselor Innes.
Yes.
Counselor Innes in favor. Counselor Kovac.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Kovac in favor. Counselor Mahoney.
Yes.
Counselor Mahoney in favor. Counselor McFadden.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor McFadden in favor. Counselor Medeiros.
Yes.
Counselor Medeiros in favor. Counselor Paleshi.
Absolutely.
Counselor Paleshi in favor. Counselor Raz.
Yes.
Counselor Raz in favor. Counselor Sato.
Yes, absolutely.
Counselor Sato in favor. Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Santos in favor. Counselor Sinclair.
Yes.
Counselor Sinclair in favor. Counselor Starr.
In favor.
Counselor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
In favor? In favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Counselor Vicente.
Yes.
Counselor Vicente in favor. It's unanimous.
Thank you. Well done to all. That brings me to our last presentation, 10.3 Development Charge Interest Rate Policy, Bill 108, related to 10.1 and Bylaw 21-2020, a presentation by Stephanie Nagel, Treasurer and Director of Corporate Finance. Stephanie.
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. Today I'm providing a brief presentation on the proposed interest rate policy for development charges. This addresses the new legislation under Bill 108 in relation to DC rate freezes and DC payment deferrals. Next slide, please. Councillors may recall that staff took a report to Council on March 12th and presented the proposed development charge interest rate policy. The report was referred back to staff with some direction for further discussion with the local municipalities and to report back by July 2020. We had some discussions on the DC interest rate policy with our finance colleagues prior to our original March meeting, but we recognized that the legislation was still new and concepts and approaches were being reviewed by our local partners. Since March Regional Council meeting, we have extended our collaborative effort with our finance colleagues prior to the original March 12th meeting, but we recognized that the legislation was still new and concepts and approaches were still being reviewed by our local partners. Since the March Regional Council meeting, we have extended our collaborative conversations further, and we've had 3 meetings with planning, public works, and finance staff from all 3 municipalities together. Generally, there's been an alignment on the rationales and principles of rate setting. Local municipal staff expressed their supports for the proposed regional DC freeze interest rate of 5.5%. It's been acknowledged that each municipality will probably have its own unique policy direction that will be developed to support their local council priorities. Service provision at the regional and local levels are also different. Notably, the region has responsibilities for providing affordable housing that is primarily delivered through the region's social housing program. As such, it's understood that we have some different financial strategies to support some of this risk. Next slide, please. The change in legislation is part of Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan with the purpose of increasing housing supply by addressing barriers that inhibit the development of ownership and rental housing. In May 2019, Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choices Act was introduced. This legislation made significant changes to the Development Charges Act, and since then, staff have brought forward 4 reports that have identified impacts from the legislated changes. The stated objective of the bill is to increase housing supply, and the region does support this goal. Council has approved the Housing Master Plan in 2019, and the region also initiated the development of an affordable housing incentives pilot program. The results and suggestions for that program were also on today's Council agenda presented by Nahida. I'll now recap the proposed regional development charge interest rate policy. Next slide, please. Under the new legislation, the total amount of a development charge for a development that's proceeding through a site plan control or a zoning bylaw amendment approval is subject to a freeze in the DC rate. The DC rate would be determined when the application is made and would remain in effect for a period of 2 years from the date upon which the application was approved. The amended Development Charge Act also provides for the deferral of payment of development charges for rental housing development that is not nonprofit housing development and institutional, both to be paid in 6 installments over 5 years, as well as nonprofit housing developments, which are to be paid in 21 payments over 20 years. It is worth noting that originally industrial and commercial developments were eligible for a deferral. However, regional staff, along with others in the municipal sector, have advocated for changes to Bill 108, and the province has been receptive to some of that feedback. As such, those two types of development were removed from the development charge deferral eligibility, which allowed the region and others to look at supporting the objectives of increasing rental supply and development of affordable housing. Next slide, please. So the province also acknowledged that municipalities may incur some additional costs as a result of this new legislative requirements. And for that reason, the legislation provides the authorities for a municipality to charge interest to cover for both the deferral and the freeze. The regulatory changes to the development charges do create a significant time lag between revenues that are received from developers and the cost of growth-related infrastructure needs. The proposed development charge interest rate policy that we've developed aims to mitigate some of this financial risk for the region. In determining a policy for the region, the setting of the interest rates was guided by balanced principles such as growth should pay for growth, and to support an appropriate level of predictability, stability, and reliability for both the region and the development community, and to support Council's priority for affordable housing with a goal of keeping the administration of the program as simple as possible. Next slide, please. We are proposing a DC freeze interest rate of 5.5% per annum to be applied from the date of the site plan or rezoning application to the date the development charge is payable. The proposed rate reflects a forecasted annual rate increase in order to cover the costs associated with the freeze. Financial analysis conducted by staff considered many variables, such as infrastructure cost inflation, the region's growth forecasts, economic outlooks, and capital markets. The rate is anticipated to remain constant for a period of time, with a review conducted at a minimum with each new background study update. A fixed rate provides a measure of certainty for developers and an ease of administration for the region. Currently, regional development charges are subject to biannual indexing on February 1st and August 1st of each year. Given that the development charge rate will remain unchanged between now and the next indexing date, regional staff propose a grace period during which the DC freeze interest rate of 0% will be applied if the building permit is issued prior to August 1st, 2020. This prevents a punitive effect. Next slide, please. As we move to look at the DC deferral policy and its merits, staff reflect on the companion report Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program, which was discussed earlier on today's agenda. Over the last several years, the region of Peel's housing market has experienced significant challenges. High housing costs have led to 32% of Peel households having affordability issues. Approximately 25% of households in Peel do rent their homes. However, supply of purpose-built rental housing has only increased by 2.1%, which is about 800 units between 2011 and 2019. As of 2019, there are very limited options for rental housing in Peel, and the vacancy rate is 1.2%, where Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation states that a healthy vacancy rate for a balanced market is around 3%. The data indicates that Peel is in need of significantly more rental units. The region has initiated the development of the Affordable Housing Incentives Pilot Program in collaboration with local municipalities. And through that pilot program, the need to focus resourcing on addressing the middle-income rental housing was recognized and will support and supplement regional programs that help to focus on deeper affordability. Next slide, please. A couple of points to mention are that interest is not defined for the purposes of the DC Act, and there is no maximum rate defined for DC freeze or DC interest deferral in the Act. From our neighboring regional municipalities, we see that York Region approved their policy earlier this year. Their policy is similar to our proposed policy. Their freeze interest rate is set at a fixed 5%, which is compounded annually upon the anniversary of the application. Halton Region Council also approved their policy in June. Both York and Halton had existing DC deferral policies in place that were designed to provide incentives to developments prior to the introduction of this Bill 108. The legislation is new to everyone, and the municipal sector continues to gain a better understanding of the changes. Most of our municipal colleagues are still working on policy development. Next slide, please. For the deferral, the region is proposing a 0% interest rate. This policy direction was proposed primarily to support and to advance Council's priority of building increased affordable housing units in the region. It is recognized that some purpose-built new rental units that may be built by the private sector would only be affordable to middle-income households. Nevertheless, this is a very important need in the community and part of the missing middle, which was also identified by the City of Mississauga's housing work. We understand that there are other built forms that are eligible for the regulated DC deferral, such as luxury rental units and long-term care units, which means they would be able to take advantage of this program at zero interest rate. However, providing options for renters at the higher end may free up current and more affordable supply. And as we've noted, an increase in supply in the rental market is needed across Peel. Given the need identified, we must use all available tools to meaningfully address the affordable housing crisis, which includes provincial tools implemented through Bill 108. The Regional Affordable Housing Program would be supported by this financial tool provided under the legislation to pay over time and supplemented by the proposed policy of charging 0% on these deferrals. As noted earlier, nonprofits will pay over 20 years, while for-profits and institutional classes would pay over 5 years. Our understanding of the amended Development Charge Act is that the Act contemplates one single interest rate for the deferral category. In reviewing the risks and benefits of the various policy options, such as charging 0% versus charging a deferral interest rate, staff recommend that the 0% deferral interest rate would be considered welcome and meaningful measure to achieve a policy objective of increasing Peel's affordable housing, while prudently managing financial burdens to our existing taxpayers. Under this recommended policy, growth pays for growth while supporting a regional objective of increasing rental supply with no cost to the taxpayer. Next slide, please. Regional staff will continue to collaborate with local municipalities to implement the DC interest rate policy and to enhance the development charge collection process. This legislation is new to all municipalities. There are many variables and uncertainties around what our future activities would look like. Staff are committed to continuing to track data and monitor the effectiveness of this policy. We will bring back to Council for further policy deliberation when needed. The policy will be reviewed periodically and at a minimum in conjunction with each development charge background study review. The interest rate could be updated by Council at any time, and this new interest rate would apply on a go-forward basis. Thank you. I'll take any questions now.
Yes, Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm supportive of the 0%. I did have, for clarification around, and I commented on this with the pilot, the affordable rental pilot, when that presentation came up. Just for clarification around the not-for-profits, would this apply regardless of the type of, as long as it is purpose-built rental? So, for example, I raised the example of seniors purpose-built rental. So, if it's a not-for-profit that is building or proposing to develop on their own site, but the units are, because it's specific to seniors housing, they're pretty much only 1 or maybe 1.5 bedroom units, but they are purpose-built rental and they are a mix of at-market and rent geared to income. Would this apply, or is it to just a specific type of makeup of units? I'm not sure if that question came out properly, but.
Thank you for that question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I can.
Okay, good. Yeah, so on the DC deferral piece, the legislation allows for a DC deferral for nonprofit housing development. So in developing the guidelines, as long as the applicant is a nonprofit housing developer, there's not necessarily guidelines within the DC legislation around affordability. It's more about the nonprofit building housing that's needed, and generally in nonprofit housing developments, there is that goal towards some level of affordability, which is why they've advocated for a longer period of time for them. What our bylaw will allow, or sorry, our policy allows, is that we wouldn't charge an interest rate on that amount that's outstanding on the development over the course of that time, so that in effect it does somewhat incentivize additional housing in those realms of the nonprofit housing developer, and that is where we get a lot of requests in terms of needing additional money or not wanting to pay out kind of DCs all up front. So we kind of expand upon what the province is allowing.
Right. Okay, that's good. One other quick question. So with regards to what's in the bill, in Bill 108, and this being forward here, in reference to incentives that that not-for-profits are able to apply to, and it was referenced again in the pilot report, and the stacking. This wouldn't in any way, shape, or form, or through the Bill 108, again, cause kind of hurdles for application, correct? In fact, this would help to speed up or support the process.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Fonseca. Yes, you're correct. It's more of a supplement to the affordable housing piece that Nahida talked about earlier. So the province has allowed for this legislation, and so it does it speeds up any process. There's no need to come for a deferral agreement with the region. We will work on deferral agreements, but they won't have to come through council. It's part of the Bill 108 policy. And without having an interest charge, we wouldn't have to come back for any additional incentives or anything like that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, at such time, I would like to move this if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demerla.
Chair, sorry, my hand's up from before. I don't plan to speak.
Thank you. That exhausts my list. For the vote, over to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. A motion moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Dillon, that the development charge interest rate policy attached as Appendix 1 to the report of the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer, the Acting Commissioner of Public Works, and the Regional Solicitor, titled Development Charge Interest Rate Policy Bill 108, be approved. And further, that charging the rate of interest pursuant to the development charge interest rate policy, and the imposition of the interest rate in accordance with the policy be approved. And further, that the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer be authorized to execute any necessary agreements under the Development Charges Act 1997 or other legislation on business terms satisfactory to the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer and on legal terms satisfactory to the Regional Solicitor. And further, that a bylaw making provision for such approvals and authorization be brought forward for enactment. I'll call the vote. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
I support.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demerla.
Yes.
Councillor Demerla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini.
In favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes.
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney.
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Raz.
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato.
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
Yes.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson?
In favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And councillors, that brings me down just to the matters that were held on consent. Councillor Sato, I'll be looking to you because I know some of them you and or Councillor Parrish were involved in. I remind all of you we'll be back at it again in 2 weeks' time for July 23rd. There'll be another regional council meeting that's scheduled. So if anything does have to be pushed over, that would be the logical thing to do. But let's have at it. 8.4, motion from Councillor Parrish to amend the COVID-19 emergency electronic meeting procedures to allow, Madam Clerk? To allow for committee and chairs to participate electronically.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councillor Sato.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, sorry. I've been in touch with Councillor Parrish and she's still down at the hospital. So she won't be arriving. She would asked if I would move that motion for her.
Okay.
As she would like that one. The other items that I asked to hold for her, they can all go ahead.
Okay, go ahead today and not held for another day, in other words.
No, she doesn't need them held. She would like
Very
this
good.
one dealt
Okay.
with today. So I will move it for her.
Very good. So on 8.4, it has been moved now by Councillor Sato. Madam Clerk, over to you.
Thank you. We'll call the vote on 8.4 then. A motion moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Councillor Sinclair, that Section 1D of the Emergency Electronic Meeting Procedures and attached as Appendix 6 to the procedure bylaw, as amended, be amended to allow committee chairs to participate electronically. Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie?
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demurla?
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey?
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini?
In favor?
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves?
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes?
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac?
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney?
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Parrish is absent. Councillor Raz?
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato?
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair? Councillor Sinclair?
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr?
In favor?
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson?
Favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Takes us to 8.5 that was also asked to be held by Parrish, and this was from Parrish and Medeiros with regards to the COVID emergency situation and transit and fire. I don't know how the council wishes to proceed. Councillor Medeiros, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, just very quickly, and my apologize, and I do apologize for bringing this up last minute. It was a request by Peel Labor Council in regards to a campaign which is being run by the Labor Congress, Canadian-wide campaign, asking provinces and federal government to provide urgent funding to municipalities, especially to support essential services. So we unanimously passed it at the City of Brampton yesterday. I do know some of my colleagues at the other municipalities, Halton and Mississauga, there was some intent or some discussion that they would. I'm not sure if they did. And I thought I would bring it here. And essentially what the motion asks our chair on our behalf to just write and show support for the campaign for funding during this difficult period.
Thank you. I have no other speakers. Madam Mayor, you have it moved by Councillor Medeiros, seconded by, I see Councillor.
Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry.
Mayor Crombie, I acknowledged
Yes,
first.
thank you.
Mayor Crombie, thank you. If you could take the vote from there, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The motion was circulated to council this morning when it was added to the agenda, so we'll give it a short reading if that's okay. That a motion moved by Councillor Madero, seconded by Mayor Crombie, that therefore be it resolved that the regional chair on behalf of regional council send letters to the provincial government and the federal government to request emergency operating funds to ensure vital local services continue, including public transportation and emergency services. We'll call the vote. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demurla.
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon. It's 1:15. Councillor Dillon did advise he's absent now. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini. Councillor Fortini. Councillor Groves.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes.
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney.
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden.
In favor.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Raz.
In favor.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sado.
Yes.
Councillor Sado in favor. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
Yes.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, in favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us down to the next item held on consent by Councillor Santos, 13.4, report of the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Committee meeting held on June 18th. Councillor Santos?
Thank you, and this shouldn't take too long. At our Diversity, Equity, Anti-Racism Committee chaired by Councillor Downey, we had Sophia Brown Ramsey delegate submit an important letter from the Black Community Action Network, which our committee passed a motion to endorse and support and implement fully. And part of that resolution was to share with Regional Council that we are in solidarity with the Black community. And I did want to, I know it's in your packages, but I did want staff, if they could, to just bring it up. Some of the stuff we're already doing, but again, I just wanted to showcase any chance we have the work that we are doing at the region as a community on the committee to really take the issue of anti-Black racism seriously here at the region of Peel and in our various municipalities. And thanks to Councillor Downey, Chair Downey, for pushing to make sure that we implement the recommendations from BCAN.
Thank you. With that, I have no other speakers. Madam Clerk, for the vote, over to you.
Thank you. That the report of the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Committee held on June 18th, 2020 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Downey. We'll call the vote. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
In favor.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demurla.
Yep.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon. Absent. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes.
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney.
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Counselor Medeiros in favor. Counselor Raz?
Yes.
Counselor Raz in favor. Counselor Sato?
Yes.
Counselor Sato in favor. Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Counselor Santos in favor. Counselor Sinclair?
Yes.
Counselor Sinclair in favor. Counselor Starr?
Yes.
Counselor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson?
Favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Counselor Vicente?
Yes.
Counselor Vicente in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, and to my colleagues, that leaves items 13.6, 13.7 out of camera, and there was one other one, those being the ones that Councillor Parrish asked us to hold, which I'm told are no longer to be held, but we also have the related in-camera item 24.6. Other than that, we have one other in-camera that Councillor Sato's asked us to hold. Madam Clerk, how best to deal with 13.6.7 and related in-camera item 24.6 on the assumption I have no speakers? Does anybody wish to speak to any of those? If not, Madam Clerk, please proceed.
Thank you. We could have one motion, perhaps moved by Councillor Sato and seconded by Councillor Sinclair as Vice Chair of the Policies and Procedures Committee, to receive Report 13.7 and receive the in-camera item 24.6, as well as the motion that the report of the Regional Council Policies and Procedures Committee meeting held on June 30th, 2020 be adopted. We'll call the vote. Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Brown in favor. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie?
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demurla?
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon? Oh, absent. Councillor Downey?
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini?
In favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves?
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes?
Yes.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac?
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney?
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Raz?
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato?
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair?
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr?
Yes.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson?
In favor?
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings me all the way down to 21. Other business or councillor inquiries? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, that takes us to the bylaws. I defer to you. Actually, 22.2, Madam Clerk, under notices of motion deferred from the 25th meeting. How to proceed on that one?
Perhaps as Councillor Parrish asked for that to be added, that we defer that to the July 23rd meeting, if that's satisfactory. If we could have a motion of deferral from Councillor Sato and Councillor Raz, and it does not require recorded votes. So are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll defer it to the July 23rd meeting. Thank you.
Very good. The bylaws over to you.
Moved by Councillor Starr and seconded by Councillor Kovac, that the bylaws listed on the July 9th, 2020 Regional Council agenda, being bylaws 21-2020, 49-2020 to 51-2020 inclusive, be given the required number of readings, taking as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. Are there any objections? Seeing none, carried.
And that takes us, the other, you've dealt with all of them, very good. So that would take us to in-camera item 24.1. Councillor Sato, you had a question about a proposed property acquisition, and we are required to go in camera, Councillor Sato? We are.
Well, I wanted to make comments on it, so I think we would have to, I'd have to do it in camera.
Agreed. So let the clerk carry out the paperwork for that, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. We are moving now into closed session. You do not have a video option during in-camera. The screen is locked with the closed session logo. As per the rules of electronic participation, each of you must declare that you will adhere to the confidentiality standards as outlined in the Regional Code of Conduct, which provides, when making decisions, the regional chair and members of council will have access to information that may be confidential or contentious. The regional chair and members of council will respect and maintain the confidentiality of information communicated to them in confidence by staff or colleagues. The regional chair and members of council will not disclose a document or information contained within a document provided for use in connection with a closed-in camera meeting of regional council. The regional chair and members of council will not disclose the deliberations of a closed session without the prior permission of the council. If you cannot make the stated declaration or appropriate arrangements so that any other persons cannot see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place, please withdraw from the meeting until we have moved back into open session. Members who leave the meeting during the in-camera session and attempt to connect back via the dial-in option will be required to send an email to council@peelregion.ca indicating their request to rejoin the meeting. We will temporarily pause the meeting and unlock the room to allow you to join. You will be required to identify yourself upon joining the meeting. If there is anyone that cannot make that declaration, please indicate now. Otherwise, we need a motion to move into camera. Motion moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Sato. Move in camera. The meeting has been reopened. There's a motion from Councillor Sato, seconded by Councillor McFadden, that we'll give the short reading, that the recommendations contained within the confidential report related to item 24.1 listed on the July 9th, 2020 Regional Council agenda be approved and become public upon adoption. We'll call vote. Mayor Brown. Mayor Brown. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie?
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demurla? Councillor Demurla? Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Downey?
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini?
Favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves?
Yes.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes? Councillor Innes? Councillor Kovac?
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney?
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi? Oh, he's absent. Councillor Raz?
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato?
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair?
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr? Councillor Starr?
Yes. Yes.
Councillor
yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson has left the meeting. Councillor
And Mayor-
Vicente? Councillor Vicente?
I say yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor.
And I see Mayor Brown on my screen voting yes as well. We'll double
yes.
back for Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor
Thank you.
Brown.
Yes.
Mayor
Very
Brown
good,
in
thank
favor.
you. That's dealt with. Madam Clerk, am I on to
Or
the,
carried, yep.
that carries, yes, thank you. Am I on to the confirming proceedings of the bylaw? So the bylaw relating to camera item 24.2 being bylaw 52/2020 be given the required number of readings taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. Moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Mayor Crombie. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. I have a motion to adjourn from, oh, sorry. I have the confirming bylaw as moved by Councillor Groves, seconded by Councillor Innocent, bylaw 53-2020 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on July 9, 2020, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws related thereto, be given the required number of readings as required number of readings taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. Anyone opposed? That carries. Now I have a motion to adjourn from Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you all. We will see you on July 23rd, which I hope will be the last meeting of our summer season. Thank you all.
Thank you.